Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, Robert Meyer Burnett. I invite you to watch and listen to the Designing Hollywood podcast, brought to you by Martika Ibarra and the great, legendary Hollywood costume designer, Marilyn Vance. I am afforded the wonderful opportunity of co-hosting the show. If you are interested in the magic of Hollywood, the design of Hollywood, the clothes of Hollywood, watch the Designing Hollywood podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts from, or find the video version on the John Campea YouTube channel. That's right, the Designing Hollywood podcast. Why would you ever want to miss it? Especially if you love the movies. Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, Robert Meyer Burnett. I invite you to watch and listen to
I played that twice. Oops.
There's a company called Hot Toys, and they make these insanely realistic, renderings of characters. They do them for all the Marvel characters or whatever, and they look so much like you. It's disturbing, actually. Like, scary. They look so much like you. But they're tiny, they're like 18 inches or something like that. They actually that's what's crazy about that company is they hand make they carve the mold. The mold of, thank you, of the.
That's crazy.
It's wild.
Robservations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude. Probably a lot of other nicknames that I don't know because people won't tell me them to my face, but they're there. Robert Meyer Burnett, and this is Midnight Musings, episode 62. 62. I'm sorry we weren't here last week. I had family in from France, and we were entertaining them. We took them up to Lake Arrowhead, then we took them to Palm Springs. We did all this Inland Empire stuff that you can do when you live in the Inland Empire and it's 100 degrees out. We did all of those things, but there's a lot to talk about. I mean, we didn't get to talk about a Star Trek musical. I didn't get to talk about Oppenheimer and Barbie. I didn't get to talk about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but I don't know much about them anyway, other than the original Ninja Turtles comics that were actually a riff on Frank Miller's Ronin that no one even seems to remember. Everyone's all about the sacrosanct 1990 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which I'm like, that's not the real Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That was like the kidified version of people that didn't read Ronin. But I won't even get into that here. Maybe somebody can. You know who else might help me get into that? I'll tell you. You know her, you love her, and she is billowing tonight. She is... How are you tonight?
I like how you said that, Robert. I am feeling wonderful. So excited. What a fun time for entertainment, regardless of the strike going on. What incredible things we're seeing in the theaters for Star Trek. It's just unbelievable, Robert. There's so much to talk about in entertainment right now.
There is so much to talk about. You know, I want to start with a tip, though.
Yep.
I don't know, man. Not me. Sends in a tip. And you might ask, what's a tip? You can send in a tip if you want. It's just like a super chat, but it's different. And there's a link down in the description. Tip says, or I don't know, man, not me, says, as one of my favorite interpreters of the cinematic art form I found on the internet. Well, you must mean, what are your thoughts on Oppenheimer? I can't tell if it's an outstanding film because it's in a sea of mediocrity, or if it's one of the greats. Well, first of all, I have to say, I've seen both now, Barbie and Oppenheimer. I broke down. I did not get to go see Oppenheimer in 70 millimeter. I saw it in Limax. What are you going to do? But it was, it's a historical book adaptation about Robert Oppenheimer and filtered through Christopher Nolan's lens. And to be honest, I loved it. I found it to be quite engrossing. The performances were great. But I think, what's really interesting to me is that obviously the Barbenheimer phenomenon, and yes, I'm wearing my Barbenheimer shirt that it was one of those. I'm such a sucker for t-shirts, topical t-shirts. If they show up in my Facebook feed, I'm like, oh yeah, click. So I figured I'd wear it for tonight. But it's hard to watch both movies and take them on their own terms, especially now that I've in the wake of it. It took me the better part of 3 weeks to see them both, and luckily when I go into a film, all that reviews, everything, whatever people have said, fall away from me. I just sit in my seat and let it wash over me and take it in. And I loved Oppenheimer. I was completely engrossed by it. I was engrossed, but the thing is, it's not going to be captivating. Like if you think about Christopher Nolan's oeuvre, like I really liked Dunkirk, and I really admired it, and I really enjoyed it when I was watching it. It's not as fun to watch for me as, say, Inception or The Dark Knight. Because it's a historical event being dramatized with real people, and but for that, I thought Dunkirk was probably the best version of a movie about Dunkirk could be. The way he played with time, the way Nolan brought his inimitable skills, style, whatever, to the proceedings, and I thought the movie was incredibly engrossing, and it whipped by. So I would say I loved it. Is it a movie that I look forward to revisiting over and over and over again? I saw Inception in the theater 8 times. I don't see myself seeing Oppenheimer in the theater 8 times, only because it's not that deliciousness with that crunchy, chewy, nougaty center that an Inception is. Now, I ask you, am I off base, or do you kind of get what I'm saying?
I do get what you're saying, and certainly there's a lot to be said about it. I feel the same way about Inception. I think for me, Inception is his best film, and I think that he really removes you and makes you believe this is actually happening. But what's interesting about Oppenheimer is that you and I, and many of the people in the chat who are older, who grew up with parents and grandparents who remember World War II, have a very different opinion about this film. And what's really interesting about it, even more so, aside from the fact that it's based on a Pulitzer Prize winning novel, and if you read that novel, I think that a lot of people could come up with different interpretations, different screenplays about what they feel is important or need to be focused on. What I think is intriguing about it is that the people who were around at that time, many of them are gone, Robert. Many of them are gone. And, we see on the news how another veteran has passed away. Another person is gone. They were in there, some of them in their 90s, who fought during the war. Nobody even remembers what it was like for the United States to be at full-on war, to have a world war like this. So this is the only thing that might be available, or even in the mindset of a person, not us, but perhaps generations after us, of what this meant and what it stands for. People are not reading books like they used to. They're not necessarily going to have that in curriculum every school. So this might be it, Robert. This might be the only time that someone, plays this and tries to understand what this is about. Because, as I said before, we are maybe that generation that grew up in the atomic age. It's natural to us, but that generation didn't have that. This was new for them. It totally changed their lives. The war changed their lives. I think in the sense of trying to get a mindset of what it meant for let's say, people in the world to understand that, I think that might have been something that the movie achieved for me. And maybe it's not necessarily something that's even focused on anymore in a lot of films, because it's supposed to be something that's understood, but it's not. We're going to see generations after this watching this in schools, watching this in different places, and trying to learn about what did it really mean for people to go to Los Alamos, New Mexico, and have this concerted effort while on the other side of the world, the Germans are doing the same thing. What does this really mean in this organization? You mentioned you loved Dunkirk. Dunkirk was one of those films, if I remember correctly, had limited speech. There wasn't a lot of talking. Nolan wanted you to understand what was going on by visual stimulation. And I think that it was important for that film to be that way because of the level of sacrifice of people who died in the water that day. He needed to get that across without, someone elbowing somebody and then the person doesn't, they're not there anymore. It's not an effective way of understanding the gravity of what's happened. And I think for Oppenheimer, he needed to go a little more spectacular on this. As I said, people are not reading like they used to. It's not in the books the way that we remember. And they don't have, a lot of kids don't have their grandmothers and parents to tell them what it was like during the war. My mother constantly telling me what it was like during World War II. So I think it is really interesting. It's this added responsibility on that Oppenheimer film and maybe on Dunkirk as well.
Well, I'll tell you something I was thinking about, and I'll run this by you because you brought something up. When I was watching Oppenheimer, when I grew up, the Vietnam War was raging when I was born. My father was in World War II. My relatives on my father's side were German. They left Germany before, pre-World War I, actually, and immigrated to the United States. But it made me think about, like, all the talking. I read a lot of commentary about people saying online that well, how come, you don't even bring up the Japanese? And what was really interesting to me about all that is it made me, like, the whole era of social media and the activism that's going on in social media, all of it, the performance activism, is being done by people that aren't at all connected to the activism, the things that they're preaching. And I was thinking about this, like, to make a commentary about, to show a story about Oppenheimer and why he wasn't in Japan when they dropped the bomb. And that's, I mean, I feel like a lot of the younger performance activists on social media who were born in the 90s and beyond have never really lived through, like, we lived through the Cold War.
Yes.
Like there was nuclear fear instilled in all of us when we were growing up. I mean, I was born less than a decade away from the Cuban Missile Crisis, and it was something man landed. I was a kid that loved all the astronauts, and could name them all when I was a kid, and we all the way through. I would say that the last major international incident, 9/11, I was terrified. I was terrified when 9/11 happened because it was the day that we had to deliver The Usual Suspects special features to MGM, and I had pulled an all-nighter, and I was how it worked is I was delivering on digital videotape. So I had to lay back, it was an hour and a half tape, so I had to lay back all of our special features, and I had to do it 6 times. So I had to do 6 90-minute laybacks. 3 laybacks with texted titles and 3 laybacks with untexted, so they could send those special features to different countries and they could add different languages to them. So I would get up every 90 minutes. And in the morning, I got up at 6, and we were right next to a Circuit City, and they were doing some construction there. And I got up, I was going to go get some Starbucks, and people were looking at the TV. And it was right after the first plane had hit. And I sat up there watching, and people didn't know what was going on. They're like, because no one saw it. There was no footage of, so people hadn't understood what was happening. And the time that the second plane hit, I was like, are we at war? Like, it was clear to me because I was very aware. I built a lot of model airliners when I was a kid, so I knew exactly what. It's like when the space shuttle exploded in the mid-'80s. I knew, having built space shuttle models, there was all this, like, well, maybe they're alive. I'm like, they're not alive. They're gone. And it was really, so when you're watching something live like that and you realize this is an attack on the United States, in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, I'm too old, or maybe for selective service. Are they going to instate the draft tomorrow? Like, these are all things that were going through my mind. And when I talk to people, especially the way people critique things these days, like when I get into conversations about Star Trek, the people that are watching these shows now, especially younger people, and this is not a slight, but they're completely disconnected. Their opinions have no sense of world politics or anything that's going on other than the fact, like, they know about pronouns because they go to school and that's part of their lives, and they can, but that's within whatever's in front of them. There's nothing out there that's informing. Like, if you were to say tomorrow that we're reinstating the draft, a lot of people would get really pissed, and a lot of people would be like, wait a minute, you can't draft me. Like, there'd be, I mean, I remember when I turned 18, was it 18, 16? We had to go register for the Selective Service, and it was kind of because you're thinking, if we go to war, it's going to be a nuclear war, and what's that going to be like? And all of this stuff sort of informed, and it really, when I was watching Oppenheimer, it really kind of became clear to me that, wow, like just being older and looking at this younger generation, and they're completely disconnected from the rest of the world, unless it's right in front of them or unless it's something they can understand. And if you were to say you're drafted tomorrow, half of them said, I'm not going to go. And it would be fascinating to watch. And right here yesterday at the Grove, the Americana, there was a flash mob that robbed the Yves Saint Laurent store in a mall, in an outdoor mall. And there was like 50 kids that just they ripped off like $600,000 worth of stuff. And, you know, people, they go in, and it's like that's the kind of thing that, like, yeah, let's go organize. I kind of would love it, because we have North Korea saber rattling, we've got China saber rattling, you've got Russia saber rattling, Iran saber rattling. There's a very real possibility in the next 10 years we're going to find ourselves in a global conflict, and we are going to reinstate the draft, and it is going to be suddenly, the world is going to be irrevocably changed. And when I was watching Oppenheimer, and when I read op-ed pieces about, well, how come no one saw the Japanese? I'm like, well, that was kind of the point. That these guys, these scientists, these theoretical thinkers, they're not going to be on the ground. You know, they would muse over these things. Well, maybe we'll destroy the world. You know, there's a small chance. What do you mean there's a small chance? How about there's zero chance? Well, you know, I don't know the theory. It said everything you needed to know right there, because the actual horror of dropping the bomb that they were making, not showing it was kind of the point. I mean, they showed the Trinity test, but they weren't going to show you Hiroshima and Nagasaki, because they assume that the audience understands how horrific that actually is. We're the only country that's dropped nukes. We still are. All this 70 years later or whatever. And it was just very interesting to me when I was watching this, and how I you know, as I go see a movie like that, and I guess all the great movies make you think. And then, of course, I go back and argue about Star Trek.
Well, you know something, I think.
So what does that say?
I think that this Oppenheimer, Barbenheimer thing has been one of the most successful campaigns of all time, maybe in our lifetime. And certainly, I was not expecting this type of response to it. And you have the shirt on, and it's everywhere, and it started with memes, which it looks great, Robert.
I mean, you know, I had to do my part.
And certainly it does
Johnny
say a
come lately.
lot about maybe us needing to get behind some pictures that we feel we can enjoy and have a lot to say about. I think, you know, we've had a lot of disappointing films, but these two films seem to have taken the world by storm, along with The Sound of Freedom, which have had an incredible effect over the world. This is worldwide. These films are coming out. Sound of Freedom is going to be released internationally soon. But the point is that even if you look at the box office receipts, it is true that Barbie made $1 billion, but Oppenheimer is still going strong. People are dying to get tickets to those 70 millimeter shows, and it's still going, Robert. I've never seen anything like this. This is exciting. It's good for the business. It's good for entertainment. It's wonderful. And I have to applaud Tom Cruise for being one of those people who got a ticket and said, I'm going to go see both at the same time. You know, I think that type of support is what's needed. You know, there's a lot to unravel in Oppenheimer. There's a lot to unravel in Barbie. They're not simple films at all. A lot to talk about. And certainly it feels good to have something to talk about and go to and enjoy. I think that we're seeing Oscar performances in Oppenheimer. What do you think, Robert?
Incredible. I mean, Matt Damon and Robert Downey Jr., everybody was amazing, you know, in the films. And it's very interesting to watch. What I find really interesting is there's a lot of talk about, you know, we've spent so much of the last decade essentially talking about gender roles and the patriarchy and equity and inclusion and all of those things. And in these movies, you're seeing one that's a portrayal of 1940s America, or in 50s America too, and then you're seeing Barbie and this fantasy thing that came out of, I mean, the hearings in Oppenheimer are taking place in the 50s, and Barbie was born, out of that same era. So in a way, it's very apropos that Barbie and Oppenheimer have come out and they've been fused together in this pop culture, social media explosion, this cultural event. And I think that for me, I find it, like I find most things, bemusing. I'm bemused by it all. And I think if nothing else, there's going to be a lot of people who hopefully they'll look into what was going on at the time more about the real world. And I think Barbie kind of surprised me. There's a lot more going on in that movie than I thought. And it's so weird that some people's knee-jerk reactions were, I mean, of course it was going to address gender roles and what did Barbie, I mean, playing with Barbies has been a term since I was born.
Yes.
And it was definitely an indicator, like even in my own life when I was, growing up in elementary school, playing with my 12-inch GI Joes or whatever, my GI Joes didn't have any civilian. They were always on the job. They never had a place to go that was civilian life. So I would bogart my sister's toys. Like she had the 4-story Barbie, like it wasn't a dream house, but it was like a condo. It was the townhouse, and it had the elevator, and you could have, you could have terrorists come up the elevator, and it was awesome. And my sister had all that stuff, and she really didn't play with it much, so it was all down. And so you couldn't really land a helicopter on the roof because it was vacuum form, but you could you could blow it up because you could take it apart really easily.
You could take it apart, yeah.
So and so Barbie and those kinds of toys were, and the Corvette, she had the Corvette, it was pink, but it was cool because I had no problem. Well, the one she had was different. She had a California Corvette. Mm-hmm. But that's very cool. And that'll fit 6 scale figures. And that's and that's the thing. I mean, it's all very interesting, but I do think that there is a sort of distance. Everybody's so quick to say, well, we're not going to talk about politics. Both of those movies were drenched in politics.
Yes, they were.
They were all about, and most things are. The problem is what people don't want to do is they don't want to suddenly get in some, ideological fight with other people. Like if you're, and what I find so interesting about that is it's because people's view of politics has become so simplistic. It's almost like your team versus my team. It's when someone says, you're just a libtard. I'm like, you're an idiot and you don't think. Calling somebody a libtard means you don't even understand your own position. And it bothers me because I would love to discuss political thought. It was the Republicans that ended slavery, not the Democrats. I don't know if people know that, and
Lincoln was a Republican.
Lincoln was a Republican, and the Democrats were fighting for slavery. And there's all kinds of, and here's the funny thing. Politics and history are fucking fascinating. I mean, you start delving in, just pick a topic. Pick any event that happened in history and just start reading about it. It's fascinating. And what's fascinating is to read, and if you can take yourself out of it for a minute, because the political parties of today are very different from the political parties of 50 years ago. They were a lot more, and I hate to say it, there was a lot more thinking going on. And I'm not looking at it through rose-colored glasses, but the times were very serious. We went right out of World War II into, World War I, then the Roaring '20s and the Great Depression. America was Prohibition, then the Great Depression, and then World War II. And then in the 50s, you had everything from the Red Scare and McCarthyism to the beginning of the middle class. There's so much interesting stuff happening. And I feel like now people are walking around without thinking about the lives that we're all leading. It's really weird. I watched a TikTok video where a teacher, I don't know if you saw this, I watched this today. a teacher was walking up to all these kids. They looked like they were junior high school kids. And all these kids were wearing band shirts like Metallica, Nirvana. And the teacher said, "Do you know any songs from the band of the shirt you're wearing?" And they didn't.
Yeah.
And I was like, the only reason to wear a rock shirt is because when we were growing up was because you liked the band. You know, and you wanted somebody to ask, "Oh, what's your favorite Nirvana song?" You know, you wanted somebody to do that. And to look at, to me, I was like, wow, that is the perfect indicator of the modern age. And I'm sure that there was a lot of kids that did know the music, but they cut together a compilation of the kids that didn't know. But still, when we were growing up, nobody would ever wear a band shirt that they didn't know the music to, because somebody would call them out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's just, I feel like today, you know, even having conversations about Star Trek, I'm like, if you really want to have a conversation about Star Trek, I'll have one with you. But I'm talking to people that they haven't even watched the original series, so they don't understand like why I'm mad in the first place. They're not going to say that. They're just going to pretend that they do. But then when I get in the conversations with people, it's clear they have never watched the original series, and so they don't understand my pain. But I feel that way about a lot of things. I mean, I feel like, and maybe it's because we all got our news from 3 different channels. You know, you got your news from Walter Cronkite, and everybody, like over dinner, my whole family watched the news at night. Like we all did. And we'd have conversations about what was going on. And it was kind of we'd all watch 60 Minutes on Saturday or Sunday nights. And now I feel like no one has even a cursory knowledge of what's going on. They'll be like, "Oh, there was fires in Lahaina." You know, and that's all they'll know about it. They won't know that there's 1,000 people missing.
Well, they're definitely not watching Meet the Press on Sundays, if that's even on anymore.
Oh,
But,
yeah.
you know, I think that for the most part, when we talk about where we get our news, it is interesting because you saw a situation at, in the 1940s and 50s where most people didn't have televisions in their homes. And they got the news from either the radio or from going to the movies.
Or reading the newspaper every day.
Or reading the newspaper.
Which is something, I read the newspaper every day growing up. That was even before I had a paper route.
Absolutely. So you can imagine the shock, and I'm going to say general shock, you know, when they heard the news about, let's say, the progress of the atomic age. That must have been quite startling to the average person. Of course, what you see in the film are the people who are working on this. Everybody in Los Alamos who has been trying to get to that point. They understand. But for the most part, the general public knew what had occurred, but were wholly in the dark about what this was going to mean. I think, you know, maybe not until 20 years later, when people even want to talk about this, what had happened, that's when you start to kind of wrap your head around. So I'm very cautious about criticizing the mindset and the individuals at that time, especially the ones who were, you know, literally fighting in the war, so to speak. It's very delicate, I think, to kind of look at this and understand, you know, what does it mean to you as an individual being at war? This is something that our modern right now, the kids now, they don't get this at all.
Not only do they not get it, there's not even an inkling of what it would mean to them. You know, they don't, and we have a war going on, you know, right now. And when you look at it on social media, people are like, "Oh, it's a big money laundering operation." Really? Well, you know, 50,000 people have lost limbs. You know, I saw a picture of this smoking hot 19-year-old girl with one leg blown off. One of her legs was blown off above the knee. And they're thinking 50,000 people have lost limbs? I mean, we lost less than 60,000 people in the entire American involvement in Vietnam. And that war tore this country apart. And over in Russia, they've probably lost 10 times that. The casualties in the Ukrainian invasion. And when people talk about how flippantly, that's where we are so glib in this country. And we're so far removed from, because everything becomes, it's so dumbed down and tribal. And it's so, no one has, but you know, we're going to find out. I mean, the whole idea of I was looking now about climate change and how there's a lot of data that's been ginned up to make it look like climate change is happening rapidly. Like I was watching this thing today on the news about scientific fraud and how much scientific fraud there is today for data on both sides, and I was like, wow, that's so depressing, because I grew up in a time when, you know, science was we had the rapid progression of technology, and the thing about it is whether people choose to believe, whether you believe in climate change or not, let's just assume for a moment that it is real. It's coming for us, whether we want to believe in it or not. And like this thing that happened in Lahaina, why it happened was because there was a hurricane driving fire. And, you know, now they're looking to play, as we always do, let's look to place blame. Well, this was the kind of thing that had never happened before. So there was no, you know, well, the communications broke down. Of course. Have you ever been to Hawaii in Lahaina on Maui? It's the most laid back place in the world, you know, hang loose, bruh. And it's like the idea that what happened in Lahaina, which was devastating, is going to start happening. We're seeing it happen all the time now. And the heat in the oceans up to 100 degrees around Florida, what that's going to do to tropical storms, it's going to supercharge the tropical storms. And we can talk about whether or not it's man-made, or it doesn't matter. But we had the hottest July in the history of recorded temperature. Now, hey, maybe that was a fluke, maybe not. Maybe we just lived through the coolest summer that we're ever going to live through for the rest of our lives. You know, and I just feel watching Oppenheimer and Barbie to a certain extent made me think about like where we're at. And even look what Barbie was turned into. This, you know, I am now become death, destroyer of worlds. I'm wearing this on a t-shirt in sort of a funny, hey, it's Oppenheimer, Barbenheimer, and Barbie. But, you know, it's like this exemplifies our modern age. And, you know, when you think about what that meant to Oppenheimer, and when he quoted scripture, a scripture, and brought this up, and what he was trying to say is terrifying. And yet, hey, now it's a meme. Now I can wear it on my shirt because it's part of Barbie, man.
It is a meme, and I think it's a recognizable meme and recognizable quote, but perhaps not many people know where it's from. Let's say, you know, to go the extra step. So there is a lot of things that it's going to bring people attention to. But for the most part, and it's totally fine if people are not interested in going and trying to find out all the details, but with the understanding that what's in the film is good enough for the average person to understand. I like the part where when they talked about how they needed the radioactive isotope in order to make these devices. And they had the two bowls. One was a fish bowl and one was a wine glass. And that's so understandable for, you know, I'm actually a scientist, but I think it's so understandable for anyone. Every time they put a marble in, that means we're that much closer to having enough radioactive isotope to make that device. It couldn't be any more clearer than that. Certainly, I think it's very innovative. I don't even know if that actually happened, but it doesn't matter, Robert. The visuals in it, what they tried to do and explain, even the special effects. Robert, what do you think of the special effects in Oppenheimer?
I mean, here's the thing. Special effects are like anything else. They're tools to tell the story. And in a way, modern effects sometimes are like pornography to me, in that they stop a film cold. The best special effects are those that, you know, tell the great story. And I think that there's I think effects now in films are overdone, but these effects work perfectly. I thought that they worked. You know, there's people, it's so funny. I've been hearing people go, well, you know, the atomic blast was kind of disappointing in the movie. I'm like, well, what did you expect to see? A planet explode? I mean, we've all seen pictures of what an atomic blast looks like, and if you're high enough up and you're looking down, it looks like, you know, a mushroom cloud going up into the air. I mean, what is it supposed to look like? I thought they did a great job conveying the power, the destructive force. I mean, We unleashed a force that had never been seen on this planet ever. It was a man-made force. We were tapping in to the kind of things that's going on in the sun, things that maybe we never should have been able to do. We were able to do it, and man was able to figure it out and do it. And the fact that we were able to do that, the forces that we were able to muster, and nowadays, people, the saber rattling, like, oh yeah, we have an ICBM that can hit LA. The North Koreans will say that. It's like, even those motherfuckers, as terrible as that regime is, they speak as if, well, we could do it if we wanted to, without any understanding of what a 50 megaton airburst would do to a city like Los Angeles, or San Francisco, or Seattle, or Portland, or San Diego. And we talk about these things because we have no real understanding anymore, because no one is left that was there. Very few people are. And that's the thing that the modern age, all of our history, all of those lessons that we learned have been swept away. And it's been a while. And everything else, especially in this country, everything else happens, it happens over there.
It's a told in a non-linear fashion. Actually, it feels like 3 stories are happening at the same time in Oppenheimer. Robert, is Oppenheimer the movie of the year?
Well, I mean, I'm a huge Martin Scorsese fan, so Killers of the Flower Moon, I'm looking forward to that, which also deals with a really interesting historical event with the Osage Indians, but it also has to deal with the beginnings of the FBI. And right now, our country is divided as to whether or not they even trust the FBI. So or the Department of Justice. And it's really weird, because even the Department of Justice, even justice in this country, just this week, Clarence Thomas has been getting donor money to go on trips. He's been subsidized by big money donors for a long time, and he's on the Supreme Court. Then you have Hunter Biden's plea deal is going away. So the Republicans are like, Hunter Biden, we're going to take him down. And here's the thing I would say, that whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, once the president is in office, like, it's his son. And when his son is going through this kind of thing, which, I mean, it's not like he murdered somebody. And I don't want to get into that, but we now have our president distracted by a family event. I mean, we've all got family members that aren't exactly, they got issues, whether they had drug use, they did, and so you've got a father and take the presidency out of it, a father and the son, whether you like Biden or not. Our president is now being distracted by this, and it's been going on for years now, and it's like, I wish people would stop and think and go, we really need our leaders to be frosty across the board. Mm-hmm. And we need the Republican leadership and we need the Democratic leadership to stop bickering. And we've got some real issues internationally, that we've allowed the Chinese to develop infrastructure and take over half of Europe and most of Africa. There's a lot of issues that we need to start dealing with, but here everybody's like arguing like the Hatfields and the McCoys, and it's just it gets to the point where are we going to stop doing this? And I keep thinking about, I mean, a fictional president, Michael Douglas, Andrew Shepard, and the American President. It's written by Aaron Sorkin. I get it; it's the prototype for West Wing. But when he gets up there and he's taking on Bob Rumson, he finally has to step up and take a stand. I love that movie. It's a fantasy, it's a fairy tale, but I love that film, and I wish that there was a little bit more awareness, and maybe Barbenheimer, in a strange way, might be the pop culture catalyst we didn't know we needed.
Yeah, I think it definitely is a catalyst in a way, certainly creating excitement for entertainment in a way we haven't had this excitement in a while. And it is a big budget period film, Robert. And we've been talking about historical films and how we don't see really as many of them coming out. Will this suddenly create I don't know, and even more interest in putting big budgets into historical films now with the success of Oppenheimer?
Well, we've got three. We've got Ridley Scott's Napoleon coming out, and we
Yes.
have Killers of the Flower Moon. I mean, look, I think here's the thing. To me, it's all about story, and great historical epics can have. Look at Lawrence of Arabia. Hell, I
Yes.
mean, I remember people talk about what in our documentary that I was in, the 1982, the greatest geek year ever. People are like, "Do you remember what movie won the Academy Award for Best Picture that year?" And it's a thing in the documentary, and it was Gandhi. Gandhi beat E.T. But what's interesting is that people forget that's a fan-fucking-tastic movie. I
Yes.
remember going to see Gandhi, and I remember I went and saw it with my friend Mike Schertz, who I do crisis medicine with now. And we're like, okay, we had to go. It was like a chore. We had to go see Gandhi, because it was Richard Attenborough, 3 hours long, whatever. And I was completely captivated by Gandhi.
Hmm.
I mean, and you think about all the historical epics, Lawrence of Arabia. I'm thinking about movies I've seen, as I was growing up as a film fan. Whether it's Bridge on the River Kwai, but Lawrence of Arabia is a historical event. The Last Emperor about Pu Yi, the last emperor of China, was amazing. I loved Shogun, which was an adventure story, but it was about the Tokugawa shogunate, and I was really into that. But watching great historical stories, even things like Schindler's List, they're fantastic tales, and they might I think that if Killers of the Flower Moon is great, I'm sure it's going to be compelling. It's like a
Yeah.
murder mystery, and it's dealing with the FBI. And Napoleon, I've already seen a 10-minute battle sequence in it that's amazing. But I don't even think if you were to ask most Americans about Napoleon Bonaparte, they would probably tell you that, oh, he was a character in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, one of the people they took to class. And I think that they wouldn't know anything about him,
Yes.
and it's wild to think that, because even growing up we had multiple Napoleon movies when like Waterloo. Kubrick didn't make his Napoleon film because there was another Napoleon film that came out that wasn't good. And I that's another thing. We all went to historical epics. Nobody didn't go see I mean, even our biblical epics. Fucking Ben-Hur. That shit was
Yeah.
dope. I loved Ben-Hur when I was a kid. All four
Barabbas.
hours of it.
Um,
Barabbas, The Robe,
yeah, the robe. Yes,
Ten
I like that.
Commandments. I mean,
Yes.
biblical epics were awesome. And I think that
And Delilah. I'm sorry. I just
Samson and Delilah.
yeah. I just they were so good.
Yeah. Cleopatra.
Yes.
I mean, Burton and Elizabeth. I mean, if you were to say to people, Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, people are like, huh? Who? You know, it's and it's not. It's just weird. I feel like this modern age is more disconnected from the reality of the world than I've ever felt before.
Yeah, there is a huge disconnect, and certainly Oppenheimer being about quantum physics is not something that a lot of people are going to sit down and talk about in casual conversation. However, Nolan seemed to create this to give it a certain level of excitement, and I'm almost wondering, can his approach be applied to any subject to get that kind of excitement again, Robert?
Well, I think so. I mean, if you on the other hand, one of the things I do think is great because of our streaming services, documentaries are as vibrant as they've ever been. There's so many great. Like last night, I was in I was working, and then I went and I kind of fell asleep in my media room where I watch movies, my physical media room, and the dogs were all curled up next to me. I fell asleep. I woke up and this Martin Scorsese documentary was on,
Oh wow.
and it was on this Kino channel. but it wasn't like Kino Lorber. It was on this Kino channel. It was really good. It was like 2.5 hours long, and it was a really good overview of Martin Scorsese. I'm like, this is fucking great, you know. And I had to get. By the way, there is a new Designing Hollywood that dropped today. I needed to send it off, and I was gonna do it last night and finish it. And I was watching this documentary, and right when that was over, then a Quentin Tarantino documentary came on.
Yes.
And it was really good. It really went back into how everything started with his career and stuff, and I was fascinated. And there's so many great documentaries on and documentary podcasts, and I do feel that people are interested in that stuff. You know, at least people that are older are watching all that, which is great. But I think the Barbenheimer, I'm hoping that, look, Oppenheimer's I think it passed $600 million today.
Wow.
I mean, 600.
Robert.
That's fucking crazy. About. And by the way, there was already a movie with Paul Newman called Fat Man and Little Boy that was directed by Roland Joffe, who directed The Killing Fields, which is another great historical epic that that people didn't go see, where Newman was playing Matt Damon's part.
Yeah, and I did a watch party on my channel with Darth Plato and discussing Fat Man Little Boy, and of course there's that spectacular scene with the Demon Core, Robert, that I think steals the show. It actually steals the show away from the Trinity test, Robert.
Yeah.
And I'm actually quite fascinated by that part of the film. Why was that so incredibly fascinating? Why does it seem to steal the show in Fat Man Little Boy?
Because I think that it shows how amazing the universe that we live in is, you know, and to see that human beings have figured this shit out, and what all that stuff, what physics and science and what it can all do, because we just take now we live in a world where we take everything for granted, just all taken for granted.
Yes.
You know, you start talking about quantum computing. I was watching a YouTube documentary that it was somebody's YouTube channel about quantum computing. I'm like, my mind is blown. It was mind blowing. And we're living in this time where on one hand you have global conflict, and it's like, what global conflict can only be a waste now. It's all about the egos of a few guys at the top who want to do what? You're now you're talking about human beings as collateral. What's going on in Ukraine? It doesn't matter why it's happening. It's just disgusting that it's happening. There is no winning this. You're destroying a civilian population for no reason at all. And you can talk about, okay, well, there's various factions and all that, but really when it comes down to it, what are you going to do? Let's say you win. You're going to march in, and now you're going to build all the infrastructure up. What are you going to do to the people that you were just shooting at? Are you going to suddenly be their friends, or what are you going to do? Lock them up in stockades, torture them all to death in a European country? Is that what you're going to do? What are you going to do? Where's your and you know, hopefully, I can't wait. Let's let the UAPs come and the alien invasion will hit us, and then we'll, you know. but there's something I wanted to talk about.
Yes.
Before Star Trek, because people are asking.
Absolutely, yes.
And I wanted to talk about the death of William Friedkin.
Yes, Robert.
Now, I talked about, I did a show, but I didn't really think it through, so I was kind of stumbling through my William Friedkin appreciation show. I didn't really get to say what I really wanted to say, because William Friedkin was a hero to me.
Yes.
You know, and he wasn't even, if you look at his career, he probably has 4 movies that people would really talk about, and that's The French Connection, The Exorcist, Sorcerer, and To Live and Die in L.A. But he made other movies. He did things like he made a play, The Boys in the Band, which was he was dealing with gay subject matter.
My favorite film he made is Cruising.
Yeah, and then he made Cruising, which dealt with the leather gay underworld in New York that he caught hell for.
Yes.
And then he did other things. I mean, he did make To Live and Die in L.A. He made Rampage, which is a really interesting movie about a serial killer and dealt with the legal system. But he really peaked early. But to me, the whole idea of verisimilitude and the creation of reality on film was something that that I keyed in on when I was like 13, when I started to become a real film fan and had a VCR and was really watching all these different kinds of movies. He was a real cineast, but like it was like, well, how did you do that? Like, how did you create reality in a frame? And I think it's really hard to do. But I wanted to read this article about William Friedkin because it has a larger meaning. And again, it comes from Richard Rushfield's The Ankler. And Richard Rushfield himself wrote this. And I just want to read it. William Friedkin and What Hollywood Has Lost. And this is by Richard Rushfield, and it was published on August 8th. What is Hollywood missing right now? Well, where to begin? The list goes on. But William Friedkin is as good a place to begin as any. What Hollywood needs, if it's ever going to claw its way back to cultural relevance, I'd say give us 3 William Friedkins and we'll rule the world. When you look at Friedkin's world, the breadth of the creative fearlessness on screen and off takes your breath away, as does the notion that not too long ago, there was an industry that accommodated that fearlessness. They didn't make it easy for him, nor he for them, but it's impossible to picture a spirit like that lasting an hour here in streaming wars era Hollywood. In William Friedkin's world, everything was big and everything was important. There were no small problems, no small questions, and no small films. And in his hands, film was a force to be marveled at and feared, and the people who created it cowered before no one. You can boil down the current state of Hollywood creativity and its crises to this. Never in history have more artists been more empowered to say more, and never in history have they said less. We have a million voices making films and shows in Hollywood, more than have ever been made before, and it all feels so very much the same. Hollywood is suffering from a crisis of blandness. We speak as a pack, on screen and off. The films and shows, but especially the films, have never played it safer and more predictably. And the personalities who make them have been well trained to behave as dutiful little politicians, offending no one, mildly pleasing all, until they get a little toe out of step and the hammer comes hurtling down on them. Friedkin did nothing small and nothing safe. Every swing was for the fences because he invested so much thought and passion into every moment. Operatic is the too obvious word for the sweeping grandiosity of his world, not just in the massive productions like French Connection, but in pieces that were technically smaller, like his later productions Bug or Killer Joe, that were set mostly in a single room with tiny casts. And by the way, if you've never seen Killer Joe, all of you, it'll make you very uncomfortable, but I suggest you watch it. Matthew McConaughey has never been better. Set in a single room with tiny cast, but contained such sweeping drama and emotion they felt more grandiose than most modern CGI spectacles. As a parlor game I have with friends, is trying to name the best 3-film run by any director. The catch being that almost all who make 2 home runs, back-to-back films, miss a step on the third. Spielberg followed up Jaws and Close Encounters with 1941, to give an example. Ridley Scott made Alien and Blade Runner, and then Legend. Runs of 3 consecutive classics are unicorns in cinema, and the game only works post-1970. Great runs in the studio days happen regularly. Friedkin's run of The Exorcist, The French Connection, and Sorcerer is generally the final word in the game. The latter had the misfortune of opening against a little film called Star Wars and was unjustly overlooked, but is seen as a classic today. It's a breathtaking burst of creative energy isn't the right word with Friedkin, intensity. It's as close to a perfect period as any director gets. But even after that incredible streak, even as his favor in Hollywood waxed and waned, and he never again had the same blank check and the same sized budgets, he invested everything he did with so much thought and passion, there wasn't a frame of his career that was ordinary, dull, or predictable. And off-screen, whatever the opposite of the politically timid, PowerPoint-driven drones who run Hollywood today are, he was it. The fact that the industry for a time tolerated and nurtured him, gave him so much rope, shows what a different place the industry once was. The stories are, of course, operatic, bringing his house painters and a bottle of bourbon to a studio movie on Sorcerer, a brute, a bully, a profane, totally inappropriate instigator, but he was never small. Think of the typical tentpole director gamely fielding questions at a junket today and compare them to him now. Or think of a 2023 director dutifully working their way through the awards circuit, remembering to keep humble, to focus on gratitude and what an honor it is to be among such talented people, and compare them to Friedkin. My own memory, sometime in the late 90s, I went to a screening of To Live and Die in L.A. at UCLA's Melnitz Auditorium. After the film, Friedkin said a few words and took questions. One poor soul, his cinematic erudition fluttering on his sleeve, asked him why he shot the film in some of the more anonymous corners of Los Angeles, why he hadn't used the more classic, iconic locations of the city. Friedkin: like what? What's a classic, iconic location? Sin East: well, you know, City Hall or Tale of the Pup. Friedkin: you think I should... That's a hot dog stand, by the way. You think I should film my fucking movie at Tale of the Pup? A couple of questions later, another audience member got up and asked him about the homophobic subtext in the movie. He stared the questioner down and nodded. Okay, you've got me. I'm a closet queer. You got it out of me. You happy now? So can we talk about the fucking movie? Not how publicists typically recommend directors handle interactions with the public. I don't think you need to be Caligula to make a good movie. There have certainly been great films and shows made by decent, kind, and grounded people over the years, but neither is it a total coincidence that the period of modern history when Hollywood was at its most vital and relevant, when it set the templates in all sorts of genres that still govern today, it was a time when some very different characters run amok. And Hollywood grudgingly made room for people, the eccentrics, the seekers, the people who had visions for things that weren't anything like what anyone else was making. Requisite aside, the different characters in those times were, of course, 100% white men, which was not good, nor were many of the places that white male artistic eccentricities took them. But I still believe that making room for bombastic personalities does not require turning a blind eye to illegal and abusive behavior. And frankly, it wasn't just the directors and the artists who brought these flamboyant personalities to the table. It was a time of colorful and idiosyncratic executives, too, who had the guts, they trusted, and made bold and different choices. Right down to Friedkin's wife, the legendary Sherry Lansing, the other half of an impossibly enduring love story and creative mind meld, and to whom the Ankler's deepest sympathies go today. Artists for a time were not just like us. They were big dreamers and thinkers who did things and feared for nothing. They made hits, they fought, they loved, and often they fantastically flamed out. But they were rarely boring, and no one would ever have suggested you could replace William Friedkin with a computer program. William Friedkin left behind an incredible body of work and an incredible passion for film and for storytelling, and an unmatchable fearlessness, artistically and personally, that Hollywood would do well to get its hands on a few ounces of sometime in the very near future. I love that. That's from Richard Rushfield and his newsletter, The Ankler, which you can subscribe to. If you're interested in the business, I highly recommend doing so. It's expensive, but worth it. And I'll tell you something. I mean, I believe that. And I think that the idea that what Rushfield was saying, that how much stuff feels bland, these days is really true. And that's why I love watching reaction videos when people go back and watch the original Exorcist. Because the original Exorcist, 50 years later, it still blows people's minds. because it is so profane and so not politically correct that when people watch it, they're like, oh my God. They can't believe what they're seeing, and because that's what it's about. And I do feel like, and now everyone is so worried about being offensive, and Friedkin, the fact that he made Boys in the Band in 1970, I think it came out, and then he went and made Cruising, and when he was making Cruising, even the gay community hated him.
Yeah, I think that's really a very touching letter. I like the Ankler. I do. I think it's a great newsletter, and certainly, I think it hit the nail on the head. I think that boldness that he had as an artist and being proud of his work definitely showed. He was the writer in Cruising, Robert.
Yep.
I think that's it's really important because of how much work he put into making the film, but to be honest with you, I think the film was like after you see that film, it changes you. You're not the same after you see Cruising. And I think that to capture that moment in culture, I'm not saying that Do the Right Thing is the same thing as Cruising. What I'm saying is they both captured a moment in time of New York that was very particular, very difficult to describe in a book. He certainly, as a professional movie maker, did something that was incredible. And even if the topic might have been something that places that group in not such a great light, I think it was a story that he felt needed to be told. And certainly, it was his inspiration for it was because there were killings, unexplained murders that were going on. And I thought that there was a lot of other levels in the film, other than yes, it is a highly sexual film. But certainly it's something that I never even knew had existed in New York. No. And I had to speak to my mother about it because, I said, Mom, what's the story with Cruising? She says, oh, yes, it happened in New York. If you went in a certain area, it was like an inundation of leather and, this whole thing and the bandanas. And, it just sounds so unbelievable. But he captured the actual people who were around at the time, Robert. It was like he was capturing a moment in history, almost like a documentary.
Well, he got his start in documentary filmmaking, and that he brought what he learned in documentary filmmaking. What I love is so for those of you who don't know what Cruising is, so Cruising is an amalgamation of a couple of different stories that Friedkin was following, but the movie itself, the movie itself takes place in the rough trade, hardcore leather daddy gay scene in New York City in the late 70s, early 80s, where, it's the chaps, it's the cop uniforms, it's the nightsticks. And Friedkin was queer. I mean, I'm not saying his sexuality was queer, but he was, I think most people who are evolved, who are interested in sexuality they're open-minded. And at these leather bars, and by the way, they filmed in these leather bars while this shit was going on.
Real deal, Robert.
I mean, you had guys fisting other dudes. I mean, there was some Crisco kisses going on in a hardcore, that's what Frankie Goes to Hollywood saying about, in a hardcore way. And there you can see in the film. Now, this is the craziest thing about that when he spoke at USC, and I think I was talking about this on some stream. I don't know if it was this one. So there's a murder. There's a killer that's killing gay men. Is going into this rough trade scene, and in it you see these close-ups of the knife going into. And Friedkin said that when he showed the movie to the ratings board, he showed it to them forward and backward, and he said, do you have any problem with these sequences? And they said no. And Friedkin, because he'd done a lot of subliminal stuff in The Exorcist, he was a trickster, that man. So in Cruising, whenever there's a murder, you see the knife plunge, it's intercut with hardcore gay sex. So you see anal intercourse and you see penetration happening, intercut with the knife strokes. And when he told this at USC, I was like, get out of town. Come on. So I went and rented the VHS. Oh, he wasn't kidding. And it's not like, did I really see that? It's very apparent what it is. And it's hardcore. It's now everybody's seen that, all that kind of stuff on Pornhub. But it was in a movie. He got away with that. And that movie, it defines the word lurid. And I love it. And I first saw that movie. That movie was produced by Jerry Weintraub. Jerry Weintraub he produced the Oceans movies with Clooney and Brad Pitt. And he was the impresario of a concerts company called Concerts West. They were huge. They were kind of like Live Nation is today. My dad insured Concerts West and was friends with Jerry Weintraub. So my dad and I, we went to go see Cruising, and I'm like 12.
Oh my goodness gracious!
And I mean, because I didn't really have, I had like a gay friend at 13, but I've always been fascinated by the gay lifestyle. I was always called gay adjacent, and that was really the first time, like seeing, because there's that element of fantasy in the leather trade and the whole, whether you're a daddy or whatever, you're top, a switch, a bottom, whatever. And they even get into it in the movie, like all the different colors of bandanas and stuff. And you've got Powers Booth going, well, that means you like golden showers, and that means you don't, you know. And it was, I'm watching this as like a 12-year-old going, wow.
I better write this down.
This movie is, I mean, because I had never seen anything like this before. Because you hadn't seen, whenever you'd seen gay characters, they were far more, I guess, swishy, call them. They were more stereotypical. But this was like, and in a way, a lot of people were worried that this was going to be stereotypical as well. But and then of course in the movie, for those of you, it's Al Pacino who has to go, that Al Pacino, Godfather Al Pacino, who has to like go undercover into this gay underworld. And his girlfriend in the movie is Karen Allen.
That's right. Yes.
You know, pre-Raiders. And it just is like, and because he brings that documentary style to it, it's shot in New York.
Yes.
You know, and it's just, they went to these real, like the Ramrod.
Yes.
That was a real club.
It was, and the night scenes feel very different aesthetically compared to the day scenes. It feels like during the daytime, it's normal New York City, but once it gets dark out at night, it really does feel like the freaks come out at night. It's beautifully done. I think he captured that eerie feeling. It's like, make sure you're not in the meatpacking district at that time of night, or whatever you want to take from it. But I certainly think that the tone that he put into the film was so important. And certainly it was a lifestyle that existed of people who were enjoying themselves. Like, this was something they were doing.
And you had New York stockbrokers by day that were into the whole rough leather trade scene at night. And if there's there's a making of documentary that was on the Blu-ray that you can see on YouTube. Just look up "Making of Cruising," and because he'd made French Connection, there were real New York cops, and he dealt with the real. It's based on a true story about a cop who did go undercover in the gay scene, and so a lot of what was going on was informed by what really happened. And you had these cops, and some of them are in the movie, that were there. And like, Friedkin loved going to these clubs before they shot there to check it all out, you know, because he was a total voyeur, and I'm sure he got off on it too, because why not? And well, it has
a very similar feel to me, like Short Bus has, where the director went ahead and decided to go ahead and seek out people who actually knew one another. They have a certain level of familiarity, and when they do these sex scenes, these very intimate sex scenes, it comes across as real, because it is actually real. People are more comfortable with each other as actors. So that's something else that I think is very interesting, to make that decision to do that. But I also have to give credit to all these men who agreed to be filmed doing this. You know, that's not easy. This is 1980, 1970. You know, for that to be put, you know, on film, I don't know, maybe some of them wanted to have a record of it, but it's not always easy to get people who are willing to have sex or do sexual acts on screen, because these were explicit sexual acts. They weren't sort of, you know, ones that you couldn't see the details.
Lael was here, but then he disappeared. I think he ran away.
Oh, because we're talking about...
Yeah, he's like, what are these guys talking about? Lael, we're talking about William Friedkin's movie Cruising that starred Al Pacino. It actually has... Oh, he's back. He's not that scared.
I think it's one of the most influential films about, let's say, gay sex of all time.
Well, and also as a cop movie, it's quite.
Well, they presented the police.
Wait a minute, Lael's here, and he wanted to put this in just for fun.
they presented the cops as taking advantage of the people in the scene, and I also thought that was an interesting twist because I wasn't expecting to see that, and definitely that's what was happening as well. That was very gutsy, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I don't know what happened there. It's just I've got to figure
I
out.
see him there. I
No,
can.
no, Lael's here. I'm just going to put him in. Because now he's just here. We've got him just in time to talk about Star Trek. But so I wanted to talk about William Friedkin and what he meant to me and To Live and Die in L.A. But yeah, Cruising is another movie that was, again, he did not shy away from any kind of controversy or anything like that, and he is definitely one of our iconoclastic directors, and he was one of a kind. And will we ever see the likes of him again? And could we ever see the likes of him again based on where we're at, as a culture and all of that. So,
I mean, I think a lot of there are definitely daring videos on YouTube that are demonetized, but are on there and are flagged for different shocking things that happen in our culture. But I think people do shy away from that. And the Barbie film, I thought, was very bold because Greta didn't shy away from any of the issues that are of concern. In fact, she likes pop culture. She put pop culture references in Barbie, and I was surprised by that. There were a lot of things she addressed, certainly not what I was expecting her to do, and I thought that was very bold to do. She didn't have to. She could have made a Barbie film that doesn't deal with any type of social issues whatsoever, but the movie does have a lot of discussion about it and circumstances in it. So I think that she's someone who I hope we see more things like that. Of course, she's not going to make anything like Cruising, but I think we will continue to see very interesting topics in her films, for years to come.
oh yeah, I think so too. Opine a little bit more as I put Lael in the show.
Oh yeah,
So you're billowing, but if you could opine a little bit more about Barbie, just give me a minute while I get Lael to
well,
put.
certainly, yeah. I think that Barbie, I think is going to bring back musical scenes and musical, let's say those dream sequences that we used to see with Gene Kelly, in things like in, An American in Paris, or even like the Nicholas Brothers scenes where they're dancing. We're going to see films having segments where we're seeing a lot of that coming back again. I mean, it felt like La La Land had that. And now we're kind of come full circle where it's great to see a focus on that area of music and dancing, but perhaps not a musical theater like what we saw in Star Trek Strange New World.
See, I don't even know if Lael has been keeping up, but he's a music guy. We've talked hip hop, so let's bring him in here, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. You know him, you love him. He's Lael Rockwell, the 1/6 scale man himself.
Hey,
Lael, welcome to Midnight Musings. How are you, sir?
It's funny you talk about music because I just left. That's why I'm kind of late. I've been, because like I said, I've been working with this band. If probably from not familiar to too many people, it's a band called Boy and Bear. It's an alternative band, so they are preparing for like a album release
Cool.
pretty soon. I think they're going to basically be releasing the album in mid-September, and just working on a few tracks and stuff like that. So we just left studio. I took over for a friend of mine, Derek, who also works at the studio. His father passed away last weekend.
Oh, man,
So
I'm sorry.
and he's Jewish. So of course, like I said, it's been mourning for them all week.
Sitting Shiva, yeah.
Yeah, so basically I took over for him, at the studio and stuff like that. So I was like, yeah, I don't mind doing it. So we just finished up about a good half hour ago. So I was just like, let me just make it home and, clean up and get myself like ready. Cause I got to get up early in the morning and go because we're traveling from here to Brooklyn. So yeah.
No sleep till Brooklyn. Come on, man.
No sleep to Brooklyn. You already know, man. It's straight up 50th anniversary of hip hop, so salute to hip hop.
Oh, is that what you're doing?
Yeah, yeah, 50th anniversary hip
Oh,
hop this year, man. So definitely,
they've
so
been they've
we
been celebrating it on NPR, but that's
yeah,
cool.
they've been celebrating pretty much all week. There's a function that's going to be in Brooklyn that it's like a Brooklyn historian. So there's going to be different artists who are going to be teaching or talking about hip hop. I was lucky enough as a producer and an engineer and mixing mastering or engineer basically to attend. So I'm happy about that. On a whim, they reached out like last week and was asking a few people to come through, and I was like, yeah, I'll come. So definitely, it's going to be a decent function. Yep.
Wow, how cool is
Yeah.
that? Now,
Yeah, it's gonna
from
be
the
fun, man.
we've talked a little hip hop before.
Yeah.
50 years of hip hop, starting in a
50 years. Yeah.
50 years of hip hop. Do you have like back Cool Herc, or do you have a
Mhm.
favorite from that the dawn of hip hop?
So here's the thing, bro. Like, cause I mean, again, I'll be 50 years old this year, so that's crazy. How ironic.
You're a child of hip hop, man.
I am
Come
a
on.
child of hip hop, 73 all day. You know what I mean? So I think for me, like I said, I go back, since Rapping Duke. I go back basically since Heavy D and the Boys, Cool Herc, Funky 4+1, you know what I mean, Kaz, you know what I mean? I go way back. So for me, especially growing up in Queens, it's hip hop has been like at the pinnacle for us for so long. You know what I mean? I remember like block parties basically at on Linden, you know uh Jamaica Coliseum and stuff like that. Like I remember like just how they would have block parties, DJs out on
Black
balconies.
parties too, though.
Yeah, exactly. Black parties too. But yeah, so coming from Queens, there were some of the greats, that we were fortunate to come up with. But in general, just seeing hip hop from its heyday to where it is now, and still seeing that it's celebrated, and seeing that now for like people who came, like for me, like one of my favorites, one of my heroes back then was MC Shan. Especially like if you're a Queens native, MC Shan was always that guy. It was that person that you knew. The music that was basically played, we used to always anybody who knows and remembers the music box from Queens back in the day, or it's just in New York in general. And then also the Wiz, you know what I mean? And Shan for me, well, he was universally known, you know what I mean? Because if it wasn't for Shan, he paved the way. His style itself, like Shan basically held it down for Queens when Queens and Brooklyn were going at, I mean, and yeah, Queens and Brooklyn and the Bronx were going at each other. So it was such an experience, to kind of be a part of that era of hip hop, man. So being able to celebrate it and ask to come back and listen to some of the historians, and then on top of that, we're going to the library in Brooklyn, to also they're going to be doing a speech on the Book of Hope. For people who don't know, Jay-Z basically he released the Book of Hope, and it's actually in the Brooklyn Library. So we're gonna go take a look and at
Are you
that.
guys gonna hook up there or what? You gonna
Nah,
party, the two of you?
no,
Um,
I don't know where it's gonna be.
I'm not. I'm going to be at the beach, but I. It was the era of the house party too, because
Yes,
like
it was. Yes, it
you,
was. Yes, it
you
was.
would go over to someone's house and have a house party. It could be in the basement, it doesn't matter. It could be in the living room, it didn't matter. And it was safe. Like we would go to these house parties. Someone would have usually you just have one deck, but if you were a DJ or you worked in music, you'd have two,
Yeah.
and you had to carry records in these crates. And it is true that there would be popular music because every DJ would carry a lot of popular music, but there would be hip hop songs, and there would be a time at some point in the party where someone would get up and get on the mic. And so that was another element of it. And it could be anybody. It didn't, if you were lucky enough to be at a party where there was a famous hip hop artist, that was great. But sometimes it could be whoever's at the party and they're like, hey, everybody, thank you for coming. Here we go. Here we go. Yeah, here we go. Yeah. And then you just go, and then he'd be like, come on, mom. And the mother would be like, no, I don't want to. Come on, mom. Come on, get please make sure you guys get home safe. Or,
yeah.
But there would be like one light in the room sometimes, like if it was
one light waving back and forth, like, straight. That's what it was like. And then if the light went out, it was always candlesticks, or somebody would actually. So it was
safe.
And you were always safe. And the thing is, it's like we didn't have the digital era wasn't the way it is right now. So you didn't have like lights on your cell phones or anything like that, those strobe lights, and straight up, like it was just everything was like it was ad-libbed.
We grew up at a time where if there was a party, and we could walk our neighborhoods late at night because they were safe. So we could walk, and there might be a party, and you might crash that party, and it was fine. Like there was no issue with it because it was parents were home. There was a lot of that. Like we were supervised, so it wasn't necessarily sort of like this free for all, sort of like warehouse parties. Not like that at all. It was enjoyable. It was fun. Yes, it was. And there were a lot of rising stars coming up at that time. And of course, I love old school rap. A lot of let's say like Little Kim, and of course with Biggie. Remember the woman's name. But another thing I was going to say is, ironically, after that time, groups like De La Soul came out, and I wasn't expecting De La Soul to come out. Like that was not a rap group that I was expecting to hear, because they're not. I wouldn't call them old school. I would say that they kind of progressed the rap art to more modern rap. Let's say they weren't hardcore, but they
were doing the daisy age of hip hop, like the golden age of hip hop, and they basically. Because when again, for people know, classic De La Soul their first official single to hit the airwaves was Potholes in My Lawn. Yeah. And for anybody who hear that song, it's just like, yo, it was so weird. You were like, wait a minute, who in an era where hip hop was braggadocious at that time, you know what I mean? Everybody was talking about gold chains, wearing like your triple fat gooses and your Tim boots. Your jeans, your suede Pumas, and then basically going up through hip hop, it was bright. And then you get De La Soul, who comes around and completely changes the scope. Yeah. And the things that they're talking about and the stuff that they're saying, it's sort of like a riddle, but when you hear it, you're like, oh wow, like it was so unique. It was different, unique, and then they introduced an era. I mean, and with them, you had the Jungle Brothers, you had Queen Latifah, you had Monique Love. You had, everybody who basically came up in Tribe Called Quest.
Come on, man, the
Tribe.
Boogie Boys,
everybody who basically came up within that era.
Mix-a-Lot, of course.
Them. So I mean, that's
Mix-a-Lot or Mix-a-Lot before I Like Big Butts. When you go back to Swass and like Kid Sensation and his posse on Broadway and My Hoopty and all that, that was mid '80s.
Yeah, I liked My Hoopty.
My posse's on Broadway.
Yeah.
That was the
Me
reality.
And Kid Sensation.
Your first car was not, like a perfect car. You saved up money for this car, and it was not a brand new car.
No, My Hoopty, we all had a Hoopty, man.
Yes.
Yeah, everybody had a Hoopty, man. Like you had a bucket. We used to call it a bucket. Straight up. You know what I mean? So
it got us where we needed to go.
Yeah, from A to B. That's what it was. Yo, my first bucket, like literally, my first car I got from my girlfriend's dad for $1.
Oh wow!
And it was a Chevy Nova, all blue.
Dude, that's the greatest.
It was an all blue Chevy Nova, and he got it because he decided to get a brand new car, and he got a brand new car, and he sold me his Chevy. It was a Chevy Malibu. The very first, it was an all blue Chevy Malibu. I got it for $1 for $4. I rolled that till the wheels fell off, and
dude, it worked. If it worked, it worked.
Yeah. The wheels did fall off, though.
Well, that's cool. So how long are you and LaToya going?
Yeah. So we'll both basically be up there. We're leaving in the morning. Cause there's a couple of different festivities that had been going on pretty much all week. We missed the actual concert though, that they had I think it was in Brooklyn. When they did like the 50th anniversary, because they've been traveling, pretty much going around. The Rock the Bells tour has been there as well.
The
LL had it. You know
bells.
what I mean? So that's been
Oh,
going on pretty much all week. But yeah, as far as everything else, man, it's crazy. And here's the thing, bro. Like we talk about, and a lot of people don't know, Run or DMC himself is a straight up comic book head.
He's at a
And
lot of cons.
yeah, he's at a lot of cons. So definitely, he actually released. They've been doing like a couple of books and stuff like that. So it's a lot of hip hop heads and a lot of comic book heads and hip hop, that is.
Oh, yeah.
And to see that is just it's so inspiring, so amazing, man. So yeah, I can't wait.
The Ed Piscor, and I can't remember the other guy from Cartoonist Kayfabe, they made like a comic book based on the history of hip hop. I don't know what it's called, but Lael, you
Yeah.
probably know what it's called.
I remember that.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
made, and it's amazing. And essentially, what they did was that they decided to make a comic book that has the history of hip hop in America, featuring all the artists pretty much from the beginning. Like it's a huge undertaking what they did. It not only includes the history, but also the style, the clothing. And I thought that was not the easiest thing to necessarily recreate for a comic book. If someone were to tell you you need to create an entire collection for this comic book of clothes, not everybody can do that. What they created was really amazing, and you can actually get their comic book on Amazon, but it's a spectacular comic book, the history of hip hop. Ed Piscor, and I can't remember the other guy's name from Cartoonist Kayfabe, but it's definitely a gem.
Yeah.
Well, that is very cool. I can't wait to hear about it next week and to hear about what went on. Now, there's a lot of interesting questions. You know, I feel like sometimes I wait too long to go to the super chats because we have these great conversations and people want to chime in.
Yeah.
So let's see. Joe Panora says KRS-One is my favorite.
Oh yeah, come on, man.
BDP.
Like I mean, like it, and that's the thing with BDP, bro. The crazy thing about it was him, and that's when we talk about a war between the Bronx and Queens, that was between MC Shan and KRS-One was legendary because you had MC Shan who held it down for Queens. And then you had, and the reason why when you hear that song, The Bridge Is Over, that was basically a battle between MC Shan and KRS-One. And it was always a legendary thing. Like, it's crazy. Like when you hear Nas talk about it, like everything he says is absolutely true because Shan was just a hero for Queens. Yeah, what I mean, it opened doors for like a lot of Queens, natives and Queens MCs and rappers and stuff like that. So, but yeah, but KRS-One, I mean, come on, man, the Boogie Down production, man, him, and yes, definitely crazy.
200 Watt Studio says, Rob, how is this Strange New World season 2 finale?
I take it that
okay. There's so many things. Here's I feel I have to say, and I know that there's a lot of people, the first time they ever watch Star Trek is going to be Strange New Worlds or Discovery or Lower Decks or Prodigy, and I don't begrudge, and if they like them, that's great, because to me, I don't have to defend. It's weird because everyone's arguing with me about, look, the reason Star Trek is still here is because of the original series. I don't have to defend Star Trek. I don't have to explain it. Star Trek already did what it was going to do. The original series is Star Trek. Everything else is derivative. And Star Trek changed fandom. It changed pop culture. The very first Star Trek convention was in 1972. So I feel that some people, like when I talk about my fervent love of the original series, the only Star Trek that existed for 21 years was the original series. The Next Generation didn't come around until 1987. That was 21 years after Star Trek debuted. So Star Trek is the original series. Now, there have been things after that. The thing is, I grew up with Star Trek, so I have a fervent a fervent love of the original series. And then when I was growing up, Next Generation took place almost 100 years later. So even though the first 2 seasons weren't the best, by season 3 you accepted it. Deep Space Nine, you accepted it. Voyager, because it was extensions and Enterprise. So from 1966 to 2005, and in pop culture years, that's a long time. Star Trek lived, grew, changed, gave us new characters, introduced new concepts, all kinds of new things happened from 1966 to 2005. That's a long run. And what have they done since 2009? They gave us Kirk, Spock, and McCoy again. Then when they decided to revive Star Trek and make Discovery, it's a prequel show. Strange New Worlds, it's a prequel show. Which means, by definition, all they're going to do is retread ground that had already been tread. And what Strange New Worlds is doing is retconning classic Star Trek. And doing it, in my estimation, badly. I feel, I've often said that I think that, especially Strange New Worlds, is the Vegas show version of Star Trek. Tonight at the Wynn, come see the hottest show on the Vegas Strip. It's Anson Mountain's hair. He'll cook for you, and he'll command the Enterprise in Star Trek: Strange New Worlds. And that's what we're getting. It's a show that I keep waiting for one really interesting science fiction story to happen on the show. There hasn't been one. And the one that I really liked, which is a ripoff the Ursula K. Le Guin story in the first season, the show is so worried about interpersonal relationships with people. The original series was not, and it's supposed to emulate that. It doesn't. I'm waiting for one interesting, provocative science fiction show. In the original series, when we get Spock's family, when we meet Spock's family in Journey to Babel, the Enterprise is transporting 100 diplomats to a conference. You find out that Spock is estranged from his father. There's a spy on board the Enterprise. There's all this stuff going on that's threatening this conference. And at the same time, you're dealing with a father and son issue that's really interesting. And in that episode, Spock explains, I chose to adopt the philosophy of Surak, the Vulcan way of logic. I chose to adapt. That's the philosophy. It doesn't matter that he's half human. He's the best Vulcan because he chose to devote himself to the Vulcan way of life. In the original, in Star Trek Strange New Worlds, there's this bizarre idea that Spock's a few years younger, so he's not the Spock that we know and love. That's absurd. He's been devoted to following the path of logic since he was a child. And this whole thing, like, oh, he's trying to get along with humans. His fucking mother's human. He's known what humans are all about since he was born. He's been taught by his mother. He knows all about human, and their conception of the character is so off the mark, and their understanding is so rudimentary. So it makes me so angry. Let me tell you something. Let me give you an example. One example that tells you how I feel about this final episode. So in this episode, a starship gets destroyed. There's hundreds of people aboard a starship. The sensors are down. They can't use their sensors to see if there's other life forms on the ship, on the wrecked ship. They find one person, one life form that's actually alive, which would lead any sane person to believe that there's probably a lot more people alive in the wreckage. What do they do with that wreckage? They don't look for other survivors. They take that wreckage, they put rockets on it, and they crash it planet side. There was probably dozens of people left alive on that wreckage. They were all killed. They never even pay lip service to it. And I'm watching this show, and I'm like, Henry Alonzo Myers, the co-executive producer of the show, wrote this episode. This episode is so full of ridiculously stupid shit. That is all, it starts from the writing, this being one of them. When Starfleet officers, I'm like, aren't you going to see if there's anyone? Clearly there's one, and the one person that's alive on the ship is not even from the ship, it's from your ship, and they're coincidentally alive, and oh, it's also your girlfriend. You know, and the show, when I watch the show, I watch the horrible writing written by people that used to write for the CW. You know what Henry Alonzo Myers was the co-executive producer of? The Carrie Diaries, the Sex and the City prequel. That's the quality of... He doesn't know fuck all about science fiction. He doesn't know about tactics. He doesn't know anything about orbital mechanics, which we saw. I hate this show. I think it's brain dead. I think it's stupid. And then they just, to add insult to injury, they added yet another original series character to the cast.
Scotty.
I can't tell you. I look at modern Star Trek since 2009 as an encapsulation of everything that is wrong with America today. It is undereducated, it's half-baked, it's stupid, and then if you didn't hate it enough, they leave it on a cliffhanger where our great captain is having a moment of doubt and pain and indecision and doesn't know what to do, and it looks like he's about to burst into tears. If I owned a GAT, I would have pulled it out of my waistband and I would have shot my TV. I was that angry. I'm like, fuck you, and fuck the show, and fuck the horse you rode in on. Those people, when we've got great television, you look at the Emmy nominees for comedy, and you look at the Emmy nominees for drama, we have incredible programming now. And why the writing staff of Star Trek, they've turned it into a joke. On one hand, you can write the Star Trek farce show that's literally a show about Star Trek fans. That's what Star Trek Lower Decks is. And admittedly, they got fun stories sometimes, but it's really all these people opining about Star Trek, which completely shatters the fourth wall. And then you've got the garbage they keep turning out. And God bless all the actors, but I fucking hate this show. I hate everything about this show. And not to take away from the actors and the set design and all the effects, I don't care. These stories are brain dead, and they do far more damage to the people that are watching these shows. They're making you less smart. Star Trek should make you more smart. Strange New Worlds makes you less smart. And I hate it. So there you go.
Well, it is kind of interesting, Robert, because you talked about that.
Tell us how you really feel.
Where Chapel is suddenly and very conveniently reunited with Spock, and I almost wonder why he would even pay her any attention because of her overjoyed reaction about how much she wanted to leave the ship. I mean, she couldn't wait to get the hell off of that ship in the previous episode where she's singing. She's like, I'm out of here, guys. You guys can kiss my butt. I'm gone. It's the best thing. And Spock is just looking at her like, why are you so joyous about this? We're not going to see each other. To be honest with you, I thought he was going to see her and say, see you, bitch, and go, like fly his rocket up and leave her on there.
But even these questions are so not Star Trek. It's the Carrie Diaries. It's CW bullshit. And the people that do write for fantasy shows like The Magicians, it's fucking high school. It is so... You know what a great start... I'll give you an example. You know the movie Arrival with Amy Adams and the aliens and trying to figure out language? That's a fucking Star Trek episode. Show me something like that. And you don't... God, I hate it. It's just... You know what? It's not smart. It's not well written, and I can't understand why they are leaning into the interpersonal relationships with the characters. Every other TV show does that. Mm-hmm. Star Trek, by definition, give us a really interesting allegorical. And again, if you think I'm being too hard on it, go back and watch Journey to Babel. As I would say to people, don't take my word for it. Go back and watch Journey to Babel. And look, I understand the effects, the ship design, all the sets. It's from 1967. It's from the 67, 68 season. It's second season. But go watch the acting. Listen to how the characters talk to each other. Watch the scene where Spock talks to his mother about adapting the Vulcan philosophy. I guarantee you'll be like, wow, this show is 10 times smarter than Strange New Worlds. Why can't they write like this anymore? Right, because they wrote like that 57 years ago. The problem is none of the people that write Star Trek now have read any goddamn books. They've only watched TV shows like Sex and the City, and they get a job writing for Star Trek. So, wait, I got to make this more like, we got to have more of a Carrie Bradshaw feel to this show. Fuck you. I hate it.
It does feel like Carrie Bradshaw, and I liked the Carrie Diaries. I love that show.
It wasn't
actually.
bad. It wasn't bad.
It was. I felt like that story was about me because that's what it was like to grow up in New York at that time and be, go to clubs and, like that was the lifestyle that it was great. But I think that the musical episode where it starts off where they almost hint that it's going to have singers and standards would have been nice if they
she says the American Songbook.
I thought we were going to get singers and standards. Instead, we got what I would call sort of like Avenue Q, Dear Evan Hansen, and Rent. And I mean the low rent version of Rent, high school version of a musical. To be honest with you, musicals are supposed to be joyous and they're very emotional. And yet we end up with a crew who's forced to sing under duress. They don't want to sing. They're not there to sing. But now, oh, great. So you're singing. Why are we singing? It's under duress. So much for that great expression, the meaning behind it. No one even wants to be doing this. And you can almost tell that because they used some people in the cast who are not strong singers to do parts that they shouldn't have been doing. Why didn't the captain have a song where he's like, I'm just so freaking charismatic. All the girls love me. Why didn't he have a song like that? Or why didn't he sing I Feel Pretty? Because he's so goddamn good looking. Yeah, why didn't Spock sing There's Nothing Like a Dame? Why didn't Nurse Chapel sing I'm gonna wash that man right out of my hair? Why didn't we see that?
It's funny because she does say I sent in the American Songbook. Uhura says this, and I'm like, I thought. I mean, I was in the Pirates of Penzance. I played Major General Stanley, and I am the very pattern of a modern Major General. I have information, vegetable, animal, and mineral. I know the kings of England and quote the fights historical from Marathon to Waterloo in order categorical. But I'm like, so you said in the episode, it's the American Songbook. Where's a little Irving Berlin? If you want to go to Sondheim, do whatever you. But I'm like, give me a break. Are we gonna? And I'm watching this show, and all of it was about these interpersonal relationships. And I'm like, wouldn't it have been interesting to see and Spock talks about, first of all, Chapel is just going to a conference. She's going to like a 3-month long.
She's not, Robert. She's leaving forever. This is like the best moment of her life.
But she's not. She's just going to this. She's going on a fellowship. She'll be back. This is another thing. She's boning Spock. First of all, Spock would never fraternize. This weird thing that they've had in Star Trek 09, they had Spock hook up with Uhura, and now they have Spock hooking up with, he can't hook up enough with T'Pring, and then he breaks up.
About it, okay? He'd be discreet.
But he wouldn't do it at all. Because here's the thing, if you're having relationships, it's not like the Enterprise D where you have families. If you're fraternizing with your crew, and Spock would realize that compromises his ability to do his job, because he has emotional feelings. First of all, as a Vulcan, he's not going to get involved. It's so weird to see him getting involved, and they make him this lovelorn character.
Yeah, that was pathetic. He's not dysfunctional. He's just horny. And it's so ridiculous for them to vilify horniness in men. Come on, you're in space. You're going to want to have sex. Let's just put it out there. Let's not go ahead and pretend like they're not breathing, living beings.
Well, also, I mean, you're out there. It's just, if everyone's boning everybody on the ship is compromised. Mm-hmm. You can't. That's why they don't have fraternization. It literally puts the crew and the ship in jeopardy, and yet it's because the writers don't know how to write any other way. They're, like we were talking about with Oppenheimer, they're so far. They don't know they can't write military. No. There's none of them have ever been in the military. They don't know how to write anything about the military, and everyone's trying to say, well, Star Trek, Gene Roddenberry said this wasn't military. Okay, if it's not military, why is there a captain? Why are there lieutenants? Why are there ensigns? Why do they have military naval ranks? It's the military and civilian. It's so maddening to watch these shows because, you go back and you watch Ron Moore's Battlestar Galactica. This show is written to appeal to 7th graders. And, there is a childlike streak in all fandom. We like to ship. We like to say, "Ooh, are Spock and Chapel gonna do it?" We love that because there is a certain level of immaturity in all fandom. Come on, let's be honest. And never has it reared its ugly head more than people that love modern Star Trek, and that's fine, because I'm one of those people too. But that's when people go off and have relationships off the ship. Did you ever see Kirk in the original series have a relationship with somebody, a member of his crew? No, because he wouldn't. He's the captain of the ship until you get to the Mirror Universe.
I mean, why, if they were going to write original songs, why couldn't they sing about stuff like what the future of Starfleet is going to be like?
I know, or what it's like to explore. And can I just say something else? Why is it that the reason they sing is because there's a subspace rift it has improbability in it, which is just a total lift from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And I hate it's improbable that we're going to sing. I mean, it was so dumb. And I understand that everybody loves it. Ooh, isn't it? It's the whole show's become this gimmicky, wacky. It's no longer a science fiction, an action adventure, allegorical science fiction show that has it's not examining the human condition at all. It's not doing anything that everybody's writing. Buffy the Vampire Slayer is a more mature and deeper show. And no, I'm serious. And it deals, Buffy the Vampire Slayer is a great show. It's like all these writers that write these shows, these mid-level, they're not A-list writers. They're not writers that create their own shows. So they go from show to show to show. They're staffed up by their friends. I get it. They're those gypsy TV writers that haven't actually created something on their own. And all they do is regurgitate other shit that they've watched. And it's all mid-list. These are all mid-list writers writing mid-list horrible science fiction, and I can't stand it. I can't stand it.
Why didn't we see Klingon opera? Shouldn't that have been in this? Wasn't that the most obvious choice?
And that just shattered. If you had any verisimilitude or any shred of reality, having a K-pop auto-tune Klingon boy band, like in there doing, okay, you might be singing. Why are they dancing? I mean,
with shiny swords.
Yeah. Why are we dancing with our batleths? I mean, all of a sudden, it's tonight on the Vegas Strip at the Wynn. See the hot new Klingon boy band. I mean, I'm watching this going, how am I supposed to accept? I mean, I'll buy into your premise that people can sing, but that doesn't mean you're going to suddenly do a choreographed dance move, and which they kept doing. And it's not like La La Land, and by the way, where'd the actual music come from?
I don't know. I don't know.
Like it's one thing to sing songs, but it's like they could have. What if they were singing all their dialogue? Like, it's one thing to sing music and it's the American Songbook. These were all songs that were written immediately. They just suddenly knew songs. Like they could rhyme. They suddenly were all MCs, dropping their lyrical flow was like Rakim's, what the fuck?
Why didn't we hear Man on Mars? Why didn't we hear Ground Control to Major Tom?
Well, they'd have to license those. They could never afford that shit.
Oh, well, I'm just saying, why didn't we hear cool stuff if they didn't want to go from the American songs and standards?
I mean, that's what, I mean, Uhura even says it. I broadcast the American Songbook into the anomaly. So isn't that what should have come out? But all of a sudden people are singing and suddenly, they're not being controlled by the demon that everybody's being controlled by in Buffy.
I swear to God, I thought they were going to bring out the puppets like in Avenue Q.
Oh,
That's
man.
what I thought happens. It was like, and I don't know why I'm in space. What are we doing here? We're on the Enterprise. It was awful.
I mean, and everyone's talking about their feelings and stuff. I'm like, really?
So let me ask you a question. So, and I haven't watched the show at all, but
you don't have to ever watch it.
So you're telling me there was really a musical? It was a musical that they did?
A full-on musical episode.
With individuals, they just needed to speak. If they couldn't sing, they could have said, "I am very concerned." They didn't have to push them to have sequences of song when they were not comfortable singing, which is something you never do. You never force somebody. But wait a minute, the whole episode was forced. They were forced to singing under duress. How about the most unpassionate excuse for having a musical?
And it was, the funny thing about it is they tried to give you an in-universe reason for them to be singing. But then at the same time, all the songs had their own music written for them. So I'm like, where'd this music come from? You know, it's one thing, like if I was being affected by some space anomaly and I was going to sing, I'd be like, hello, Lael. Hello, it's so good to see you on this Friday night. We're going to have a good time musing with our friends. I mean, I would be like randomly making shit up. I would not have a backing track and sing with chorus and melody. and I know this is a weird thing, but if you're trying to give me an in-universe reason for me to sing, and Uhura's put in the American Songbook, if you Google what the American Songbook is, you're going to get very specific songs back out at you. Mm-hmm. And that's interesting. But why wouldn't people like, and why was it all in English? Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, I know it was the American Songbook, but and why wasn't everybody doing a different kind of song from different eras, from all kinds of things, like it and then when you cut the Klingon thing was done as it was just a joke, because it's like, okay, where did that even come from?
But
and
Robert,
why are they being auto-tuned?
They were dancing in the halls of the ship. It was like joyful. It was celebratory. I almost thought they lost gravity for a second. They were in such unison, floating in the hallways, jumping up and down. I mean, wow. It really was just, I haven't seen this much spirit since I was in high school during Spirit Week, except in high school it was real. This was completely fake and staged. And to be honest with you, Uhura, the woman who plays Uhura, has a beautiful voice. So does
she's great.
Have a beautiful voice. Just let them do it. They didn't have to bring in all this other nonsense of singers that I say they're okay, but they're clearly the strongest singers and know what they're doing.
Well, I mean, and even at the end, the message is that we're the great crew of the Enterprise, and when we be a crew, we're amazing. Like, that's the most obvious. Of course, that's like what Star Trek is. We needed a song to tell us that. Do you know what they should have done? If I had done this episode, the Klingons show up, right? It would have been a rap battle. You would have done something. You would have had a freestyle rap battle between the Klingons and between the Federation. And you would have had everybody espousing their political beliefs or something, and it'd be diss tracks and all that. And you'd literally have, and the thing is, it would have been the two ships. It would have been what they were doing together by squaring off. It would have been the power that was rising up from both crews. That was the power that would have sealed that thing. And the Klingons would have been like, we won. Or something, and it would have been badass, and it could have been a lot of fun, but there wasn't even that cleverness there. They turned the Klingons into a joke when the Klingons should have showed up, and they should have dropped they
should have been like Snoop Dogg.
They would have dropped the needle, man, and you would have seen the Klingons. I mean, how cool would it have been? If you had some, like, three of them were freestyling around the captain, with their, and it would have been badass. And then Pike stood up, and then everybody stepped up and did, because the bridge is circular, so people would step up and kick out, and it could have been. It is the 50th anniversary of hip hop. If you had the Klingons and the Federation square off, and it was an MC battle between ships, and that energy is what. Then I might have liked it, but it was so stupid. We're the crew of the Enterprise, and aren't we great? If we're a crew, everything gets made. Fuck you. It's so bad.
So
it was also
I haven't watched the show. So
don't ever.
That's
man.
the thing. I know, because I won't. But what I'm saying is, it's like, was this well received by other people? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, for them to decide to go this route, you know what I mean? Was it something that was well received by?
There's a lot of fans because
okay.
here's the thing. There is a contingent. There's a part of fandom that and it's also tribalism that just will embrace anything Star Trek. Even bad Star Trek is good. I just love Star Trek, and I've got friends that are like that. But what's interesting is that I would actually love to see the level of the very best Star Trek writing, I would, if Star Trek's going to do a musical like so many other TV shows have done musicals, it should have been great. It should have been great. It should have been really clever. It shouldn't have just been characters talking about their feelings, because that's all they do. They fall back to that because they have no big ideas. There's not one big idea on this show. It should be, Star Trek should be thought-provoking, and all we get, they all fall back to interpersonal relationships because all of these writers, that's all they do. Buffy, Buffy is basically, the genius of Buffy was, it was a show about high school angst, romance, friendships, all that. Except your high school's in a town that's built on a hellmouth. So you have all the evil of the world that you also, Buffy the Slayer has been chosen. So this girl that should have been a cheerleader turns out to be a vampire slayer, and she's all that stands between the evil of the hellmouth consuming the earth. So that's a great premise, but ultimately it's still dealing with what does it mean to be a teenager and get older and grow older, and what do all these interpersonal relationships mean? Star Trek isn't that, and they wanted to be that, and it's not. And then they're going to do a musical episode, so let's compromise the idea of making what does a musical look like within the Star Trek framework? Well, what they've done is they've changed the Star Trek framework, so Star Trek is more like Buffy than it is Star Trek, because all the writers know how to do is write interpersonal shit. They don't know how to write science fiction.
At the end, clearly Uhura is the strongest singer. Well, she and Noon are the strongest singers.
Yeah.
And at the end, after everything has happened and, nobody's singing anymore, she's sitting at her console. She starts humming. And when she hums, everybody on the bridge gives her this look. And it's almost like, what you doing, Uhura? Like, what are you singing, Uhura? Like, they're actually not happy hearing her sing. And I'm like, this is the wrong response to this. You guys hated singing from this type of reaction. How can you enjoy it knowing that your response to even hearing her hum, she's a beautiful voice, makes you feel sick? Like it's so contradictory to this whole thing.
And the funny thing, canonically, Uhura is a singer. We saw Nichelle Nichols sing, Beyond Antares, and she sang for the crew. She was great. And so that's part of her character. So for her to be it makes sense to make her like the front person to sing these songs. And I really, here's the thing, I really like the actors on this show. I think all the actors are quite strong. And yet when they do shit, it makes me hate. I don't hate the actors, I hate the writers. I hate all the writers on modern Star Trek. They all need to read 10 science fiction novels. I don't care what they are. They can read any 10 science fiction novels that were written before 2000. Read top drawer science fiction, because they have no understanding of science fiction.
Yeah, read Project Hail Mary by anything by Andy Weir. There's just, it's so ridiculous. Watch The Martian, understand what you're talking about.
They have no sense. They can't write science fiction. So all they do is they write anyway. So that's what that was the second super chat. 200 Watt Studio, that's what I thought of the finale. I know I stepped up, I took your bait. Anonymous says, one thought I had during Oppenheimer is how he would have reacted to the pop culture that occurred because of the bomb, particularly how the Japanese used Gojira as an expression of their suffering. I would love a book or documentary about that. I mean, I think that's really interesting, but I honestly think people like Oppenheimer probably wouldn't care. I mean, he would have been too haunted by what had happened and what are the ramifications for man. What are the ramifications of man? And we saw a little bit of that. What are the ramifications of what they've done now? Where do you go? I mean, it's a terrifying. Talk about where do you go? At the end of Buffy, once more with feeling. Where do we go from here? The battle's done and we kind of won. We'll shed our victory tear. I mean, it's an interesting idea. Yeah. But it would be interesting. But I think those guys knew that they opened Pandora's box, and they didn't know. I think they all feared for the rest of humanity. And where we're going to go. And then they had to live in the Cold War, the world they had wrought. So, yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah. I mean, what do you do at that particular point? I mean, just knowing that you have to face the music and as a result of everything that you've, I mean, being the mastermind behind something that you've constructed and the aftermath behind it, would you even want to relive those moments? Would you want to see anything, whether it's spoofed or whatnot? No, you wouldn't. Like, would you even want to say anything knowing that, that responsibility was on your shoulders at that point? Like, yeah, I wouldn't want to see anything, even if it was like, I mean, because we know that Godzilla, Gajira, as they would say, was derived and derivative of what actually happened, the atomic bomb, and this, that, and the third. But and that was their way of kind of. So I mean, would you say that Oppenheimer was basically responsible for great fiction, when it comes to the way the world was viewed after that, the aftermath of it.
Well, I mean, the aftermath was that suddenly humanity had to live in a world where, at the press of a button, the end could come.
Yep.
And what happens when we now and most of the people, including Oppenheimer, the 50s, the 60s. I mean, we were on the brink of nuclear war in the early 60s during the Cuban Missile Crisis. We were this close to slinging missiles at one another. Mm-hmm. And unless cooler heads prevailed, that I don't necessarily think exist today. I mean, nowadays, people, the egos people have on them. What we saw happen in, what was it? Was it in Alabama? Or not Alabama? Where was the little altercation on the
Was it Tennessee?
Was
it was in
the boat captain, the guy.
Yeah. That was in. I think it was in Alabama.
Was it? I mean, that
I think it was.
I
can't remember, but don't get me started, because the thing is, bro. Yeah,
I won't. We won't get into that, but I love the brother in the water who's swimming over to get into the fray. I love that guy. He's my new hero. He's my new hero.
Yeah, but I mean, even when you see something like that, which, like I said, not even getting too far into it, but you just see basically how something that I thought and I looked at would, I thought, wow, like what is going to basically be the perception afterwards, but it unified both sides in so many different ways afterwards. If you read into it and what people were actually saying, and at the end of the day, dude was just doing his job. What I mean? He was,
and I think a lot of people have said that, and even people have come out and said
his job. But yeah.
Yeah, the moral of the story is don't day drink when you're on a boat.
No, don't
do that.
Yeah, don't do
that. Scott Bartholomew says the first sci-fi novel I read was The Dueling Machine by Ben Bova.
Oh,
I remember that story. That it was like some kind of it's so long ago that it's kind of like a Star Trek episode. You're battling, but nobody's really dying. It's warfare, and no one's really. It's been so long, but yeah. I'm a Ben Bova fan, actually. Son of John says, Rob, Alex Kurtzman and Akiva Goldsman offer you $25,000 to consult them on how to make Star Trek relevant and popular with all generations. What would you suggest? First of all, for $25,000, they'd need to back up a Brinks truck that has a lot more money than $25K in it.
You didn't go to the Star Trek con in Vegas, did you?
No. I was gonna go to see Anthony, but we had family in from France, so I didn't go. I mean, I used to go there a lot, but it's I didn't go. I wanted to see Anthony because I wanted to meet him, but face to face. But I will, but I didn't go.
I was hoping that you were gonna go, because I was hoping that I was like, yo, if all of a sudden I hit YouTube and there's like a video, or I see TikTok and there's a video or news that a guy was fighting at at a Star Trek convention, and it's not even you against the fan; it's you against the writer. And stuff
But
like
you know, I would
that.
love
The tables. That would have been funny as hell, bro.
I would love to sit down and have, because you know I used to I did
Yeah.
spend 3 years interviewing writers
Yeah.
for Star Trek,
Yeah.
and when you interview it was funny because Brandon Braga, when he started on Star Trek: The Next Generation, the 4th season, I was writing for Sci-Fi Universe magazine, and
Yeah.
he was kind of our villain. You know, we all kind of knew him, and he dated somebody that was on the staff, and we portrayed him because he came in and he joined the writing staff. He wasn't even a big Star Trek fan, and when he started writing things, he was always writing the weird stories, and he would throw these raucous parties at his house, and he was the sort of enfant terrible of the young writers on Star Trek. So, you know, I've been talking with Star Trek writers for a really long time. But I think that the writers who are writing Star Trek, they don't have any sense of history. They don't care. And I feel that they've done tremendous damage to a franchise that meant a lot to not just me, but to a lot of people. And there's a lot of people that still like it, and people think I'm gatekeeping. I'm not gatekeeping, because there's a lot of people now that don't know the difference. You know, and there's people that go back and try and watch the original series and they can't because it looks too dated to them. And I totally appreciate that. Just like I wouldn't expect somebody to go back and watch a stop motion animation Ray Harryhausen movie like Jason and the Argonauts after they've seen Jurassic Park. It's really hard to go back and put yourself in the mindset of something that was made 57 years ago and accept it when you are 30 years old and all you've ever seen is great special effects. You know?
I think that it's crazy because, and I was talking to it was me, you know, because of course, like here, or you know, in my household, in my family household, we are the house of Star Wars and, you know, whatever. So when we talk about it, and when we have these conversations, we always talk about Star Wars. We talk about the evolution of where it started, where it is now. And I always talk about how, for me, of course, the legacy is with the original films. But it's, you know, one important question that was asked by a cousin of mine who is a writer was like, do you think, are you accepting of the simple fact that change will happen and that change is introduced to a whole new audience, and they're seeing something that's more so it kind of speaks volumes for today's culture? They have to kind of evolve the franchise a bit to kind of not make it modern, but evolve the franchise, whereas if they go back and look at old films, they're going to see it from a totally different perspective with the way new eyes now for this generation. If they go back and look at things, for them, they may understand it, but they'll probably think it's sillier than what we thought. Whereas now it's constantly evolving, and like they're seeing a story from where it started. They're seeing a story now that's translated differently.
I think
what I, you know, and I was asked, would I accept it? Am I accepting it? I was like, yeah, I accept anything, because I believe that it's a way to continue the franchise, and hopefully, you know, again, years to come, it will continue going forward. My only thing is, yes, you can continue it, you can evolve the story, but it always starts. And I told him, I said it starts with the writing. The writing has to be good. I'm with anything that's going to be good, and if the writing speaks volumes and it's good, then I'm fine with it. If execs get out of the way and let the writers and the creators have more authority over the project, then I'm basically with that. So I'm good. I'm good with evolution. I love seeing, you know, franchises and different IPs evolve, but it's, if the writing is well, then, you know, I'm good with that. But if it's not, and there's holes in that, then of course, because the hardest thing about a writer is you have to basically take the lore, everything that we know about the franchise, even though you want it to evolve, you got to also kind of pay homage to what came before.
Yeah.
And if you're not doing that, and if there's no connective tissue there, I think that's where it kind of falls apart. Because if you're basically trampling on what came before, then it's like, wow, there's zero respect. And you're going to have people like us that will speak out against it. You're going to have people like Rob that, will become the single man Montgomery that would actually go to conventions and swap people with metal chairs and stuff like that because he's pissed over the simple fact that they basically changed a franchise that's so beloved, or they're stepping on things that came before and changing the narrative, and it doesn't make sense. So I get it, bro.
But here's the funny thing. The thing with Star Trek is we have seen it change and evolve. And it was changing and evolving, and there was good Star Trek. It wasn't all good, but from 1966 to 2005, we got great Star Trek in Next Generation, we got great Star Trek in Deep Space Nine, we got great Star Trek in Voyager, and we got great Star Trek in Enterprise with different characters. Even Deep Space Nine was a different premise.
Yes.
And when you go back and you watch Emissary, the pilot for Deep Space Nine that sets up everything, it's really good. It has really heady science fiction concepts. It sets up Ben Sisko as a character. He's a widower. He lost his wife during the Battle of Wolf 359. He's a single father. He's been sent to this outpost, kind of because he's kind of a burnout, and he's depressed, and they're kind of shuffling him off to some place to hopefully he can do something. It's really, really interesting. And we did get it. And even the animated Star Trek, for as limited as it was, for 73 and 74, for Saturday morning cartoons, there was some really sophisticated episodes amongst the 22 that they made. Yesteryear being one of them. And there's some great animated episodes. And what I find really interesting is, here's the thing that bothers me. Like, I'll give you an example with Star Wars. So I believe, because I know for a fact, that when George Lucas was writing Star Wars, he had knowledge of how an empire would work. He had knowledge of, say, if you're going to tell an allegorical story about a Nazi regime or something, he was educated on those things. And so he imbued Star Wars with, like, you can't talk about a galactic empire with having not thought about the structure of it all. And you can't hark back to ancient Rome. I mean, you see this in the prequel trilogy. This is how democracy dies. And all of that. I mean, people, it's so funny. I don't want to talk about politics. Star Wars is a political entity that's literally about a rebellion that wants to overthrow an oppressive government. It's there, and it's so funny when you see one of the things we'd never seen that's why I loved Andor so much, is we actually saw how did an empire rise, and what were they? What was the day-to-day functionaries? I mean, it's one thing to look at the Jedi and look at the governors and look at Tarkin and Vader. You're looking at the top echelons of command. But what Andor gave us was a look at the workaday people. The people that are in the precincts, that are I'm assigned to this planet, or I'm over here, I'm part of the Imperial garrison. I'm just some dude that's working for the Empire. We'd never seen that before. And it added an extra dimension that made Star Wars very real. And so the thing that's frustrating, I think, for modern audiences, we have so much great programming where they do think these things through. And I think that, like, when you're watching Kenobi, you're looking at, you've got Ewan McGregor coming back, and when they shoehorn in a young Princess Leia, I think we know as an audience that we're like, okay, somebody on some corporate level made them do that.
Made that conscious. It's just like we talked about yesterday with someone, when you have season 3 of The Mandalorian, and how Jon Favreau did not want to have, Grogu during that show.
Right.
He, felt as though that, with Grogu's journey with Luke, that was the send-off for that particular character that eventually we would see the evolution and we would come back to. But no, they wanted, and honestly, I think that bringing Grogu in with Luke, with even actually going back to that in the Book of Boba, it hurt them. It really, really, really hurt that friend. It hurt that show because it came out of nowhere and it wasn't really relevant to the story. Yeah, I mean, at that point, and I think that really, really hurt them doing so. They shouldn't have done that at all. And as much as I love it, and I try to champion the franchise because I do want to see it evolve. I'm going to be quick to point out some of the biggest mistakes because there was, Grogu had it to me, just to me, there was no relevance to Grogu in season 3 of The Mandalorian. There was no reason why he should have been there at all, in my opinion.
Well, you just pointed out the problem with all modern franchises is that the stories that are being told by the people that are trying to tell stories are suddenly Disney, and this is not Kathleen Kennedy. This is Disney that says we need Grogu. Grogu's this breakout star. We're selling Grogus. We're selling. So all of their decision making is not based on telling a great story. It's based on what their corporate interests are diametrically. It's so funny because it shouldn't be. Let me finish, but saying my thought. But corporate interests are diametrically opposed to great storytelling. But the thing is, it's the great storytelling that made the franchise sexy for a corporation to buy it in the first place. Without the underlying great stories, I mean, and then you literally get a guy like J.J. Abrams who knew everybody in town, and he gets the job. Oh, I did Mission Impossible for Paramount, and nobody in town. You don't have people knocking on Paramount's door going, "I'd love to direct a Star Trek movie," that are qualified to do it. So they give it to someone like J.J. Abrams, who then says, "Well, I never really liked Star Trek, so I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to make Star Trek into something that I do like, which is Star Wars." And he was probably thinking the whole time. So he wasn't even ever interested. His job was to make a Star Trek movie and to make it more palatable to the masses. So immediately his mandate from on high is to change the very thing that he's been hired to make. Because nobody knows how to make, nobody at the corporate level, I dare say, based on modern Star Trek since 2017, nobody knows how to make good Star Trek. They don't know how. They're, on one hand, you got Mike McMahon doing the animated show Lower Decks, which is just a riff. It's like, yes, I've seen every episode of Star Trek, but they don't take it seriously. Everything is to be laughed at and wink, wink, nudge, nudge. They do get some interesting stories within that context, but really it's a show about people who've watched Star Trek. That's what it is. It doesn't exist unto itself. And Strange New Worlds and Discovery, they all exist. It's weird to say, but they exist outside the franchise. Everything is a meta commentary, even by making the Gorns. And I see people on Twitter. They're like, "Well, Rob, that Gorn suit, it's so goofy. It's great that we have updates to the Gorn." And I'm like, okay, it's goofy because you're looking at something that was made 57 years ago. And it's a guy in a suit, and it was done for TV. There's no CG. You grew up in a world where you had all the greatest makeup effects in the world. But if you look at the design of that Gorn at the time, it was awesome. It was scary. He moved slow, but you knew that slow and steady will get to the finish line. And like I pointed out, he's wearing clothes, so they have fashion sense. And when you hear him, somebody was even complaining, "Well, it's the dumb voiceover." I'm like, that's not the actual voice of the fucking Gorn. He's talking into a universal translator. That is the computer giving you back what he's saying in English. He's just going, and we're hearing it as, "I will be quick and merciful," and it's like, and people are throwing this back at me. I'm like, do you not even understand the context of what you're watching in the original episode? That isn't the Gorn's fucking voice. And even when I was 5 years old, I got that. That's why he's talking into the thing the whole time. He's being translated because he doesn't speak English. And even though everybody there, and it's frustrating because the corporations, and the reason that we're so mad at all of the things, they're not allowed. They can't go out and get the greatest writers. What I don't understand is, for these franchises, why don't they have like the best filmmakers in the world have pitch day? Like, if you've made a movie that's worked at this level and you've ever dreamed of making a Star Wars movie, why don't we have you come in and you pitch it? And if we why aren't they developing Star Wars movies with up and coming talent? It's so weird to me that they don't have. why don't they have the Sundance Lab? Why aren't they 24/7? Why don't if you buy Star Wars full time, why don't you have like the greatest commercial directors, the greatest music video directors, the greatest theater directors, whatever? If you're interested in Star Wars, have people come in and pitch constantly. Like, why isn't there a development division where you have actual filmmakers like, Julie Taymor, who directed The Lion King for Broadway and made movies like Titus and Across the Universe? Why isn't Julie Taymor not coming in and pitching her Star Wars idea? I mean, it's so weird to me that these franchises are treated like, I don't know. There's only like one or two people they'll hire to direct these things, and then Disney's like, you have to use Grogu. Well, okay, that's great for you to say because you want to sell Grogus, but we're the ones that have to make the story that Grogu was in the first place. And if the story's not good, people are going to tune out. And
you run the risk of if you don't write good stories and you're trying to shoehorn this character in, people will hate that character. So there goes your selling point at that point. Yeah, and I mean, I'm like, I don't care about that anymore. Like the story, it didn't serve the purpose of the story. I'm all Grogu'd out. You know what I mean? Like that's what you'll hear instead of giving us something whereas you anticipate seeing the character again. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like you anticipate that. I mean, I would even take like, a story that's written whereas you can see from two totally different perspectives. We're following the main story, but then we also flash over and see what Grogu was doing with Luke slightly. But again, like it's just one of those situations where it was a buildup. Give us season 3, and then at the end of season 3, we see Din Djarin headed back to find, but give us a whole year off. Like a year off of that particular character would have made sense, and I think it would have served the story. But again, they're showing how these execs get in the way because they feel as though they know what we want, and they really don't. They really don't. They don't know. They can't really fathom what it is from a viewing standpoint, what it is that we really, really like, because the question is never asked because all they see is dollar signs, money that they can make, what they think is going to work for the company. And now it's not. So now you have a suffering franchise right now. Now you have a suffering IP. The whole, the whole landmark of a streaming service or, a streaming property, right now is in jeopardy because, really it's a disservice of the fans when you have terrible writing and you're seeing holes in that writing. It's just not the fact that we hate the characters. We hate the writing behind the characters. It's not that we hate the franchise. It's the writing that causes that franchise to suffer. I would have, and here's the thing, and I talk about this all the time. I understand that residual gain is a big thing and that they wanted to make their money back. But had they had waited just a few more years to write a good story, even with the sequels, something that was more cohesive where we understood, okay, they had a plan. If they would have, we wouldn't have half the conversations that we have. But no, you wanted to rush these things. You gave us 2 good seasons of The Mandalorian season 1, season 2, great seasons. You fumbled on the third. I mean, it was divisive. Don't get me wrong, there were certain aspects that I loved of the third, but you have to admit that you fumbled. Obi-Wan Kenobi, bro, a character that we grew up with who should have actually, and I believe should have had a fucking movie. Should have had a movie. There should have been a film if you wanted to do that character, because it wasn't a story that you can tell in how many episodes? 6 or 8 episodes. There wasn't a story that you can actually tell in that amount of time. They say that Lucas wanted more fast paced. That's how he ran it. But I bet you Lucas wasn't talking about fast paced as a television show. Fuck that. You can't tell a story in that amount of time. It needed to be a cinematic fucking film, and they didn't. They didn't fucking do it, and that was the point. Boba Fett, you gave us one badass fucking scene or one episode in The Mandalorian, and you just basically wet the palate. We wanted to basically see that character go forward in his own show, and then you cut his balls off when we get that damn show. What the fuck was you thinking? Like, what were you thinking when you did that? It made absolutely no sense. And the mystery surrounding this character was taken away because you wanted him to show his fucking face the entire time. Come the fuck on, Disney. Think about what the fuck you were doing. You fucked it up. Now you're licking your wounds, but you're still trying to blame the fans. You can't do do that, bro. You cannot do that shit.
You know,
You
what's really interesting too is like there is an Obi-Wan Kenobi novel, and it's pretty good. You know, and the thing is, you look at this and you're like, okay, if you're gonna do, if I actually love the idea of Boba Fett decides, okay, I'm a ex-Mandalorian, I'm a bounty hunter, and for whatever reason, through this experience of being in the Sarlacc pit, I've been reborn, I've gone through some crucible, and I want something for me now. And there's a power vacuum that's been left in the wake of the death of Jabba the Hutt. Here on Tatooine, this criminal empire, how many stories have we seen, even going back to ancient Greece, when a leader comes and rises up and takes control, takes power, whether it's a Caesar, whether it's Michael Corleone in The Godfather, take your pick. We have hundreds of great stories that you could look to and adapt and draw from for the Book of Boba Fett. You could have, you know, his relationship with Fennec Shan, all the things that are, that it could, the premise was sound, but the execution was written, again, by people. It's like, where are you looking? You know, go rip off even like the great Star Trek episodes or something, or even Quentin Tarantino. They're all the great artists are looking to other things to be inspired by, and the thing about Star Wars was, fucking take a page from George Lucas's goddamn book and look at Kurosawa. You know, go back and fucking watch Yojimbo or watch Sanjuro. I mean, the Book of Boba Fett should have been exactly what the Man with No Name did in Fistful of Dollars.
Yeah, bro.
It's like you roll into town and like you
fuck shit up, bro.
And what was Fistful of Dollars? It was an adaptation of Kurosawa. And
bro.
It's like these motherfuckers it's right there in front of them, and the frustrating thing is, bro, it's like, how do they not know? And it's so even the idea of getting the Tusken Raiders on your side, that's power. That's they're the Fremen. They're the fucking Fremen from Dune. You got the fucking
that is
Tusken
fucking
Raiders.
Power, and
I mean,
that should have been right there, bro. That right there was a fucking missed opportunity, because you had that in the middle, and then you slaughter them all off. Like, what the fuck? And then there's no mention. What the fuck?
Even if the writers don't have any talent, they don't have to write anything at all. All those good stories are already out there.
They're already, and you're just very. I mean, this is
right.
Wrote the
They're
story,
there,
and we could at least have some sense of, well, there's a thought to this, and they
well, that's the problem. That
credit deserves it.
Yeah, see
I mean, so I didn't mean to cut you off there. I think that writers do reach out to other writers.
Yeah.
We're not getting, perhaps they're not expanding out and doing these things that you would normally hear about writers collaborating and what influenced them, and we're not getting a lot of that. And of course, there's also this insertion stuff where we're seeing behaviors that feel very modern but are not appropriate to the characters that we're seeing in these, in the science fiction story. That's not a realistic thing that would happen. Grogu is not going to jump out of a cart and hug Mando during a battle in the street. Like,
and that's what fuck. Oh my god, I wanted to pee on my TV when I saw that fucking scene. I was so fucking mad. I was like, what the fuck?
They would have said, "Stay with me," and then when he's done, you can go see him.
It made no sense. The thing is, putting that
Luke
in
would not have sent him alone.
No, fuck no.
All sorts of things where you're like, I don't think this is right, and we're seeing those things. But there's a lot of self-insertion in the sense of, as a writer, I don't have an idea. Let me talk about what happened on that bullshit date that I went on a few weeks ago, where we get into this discussion with this guy, and things almost happen, but then they don't, and then we reject each other. We're seeing this over and over again. It's like their failed dates, their failed relationships are being reflected in the characters. The sad old man stories are being reflected because they have poor relationships, let's say with men or with older men. And we are seeing a lot of that, and also children who don't understand where their place is in this society. So we have young characters who don't quite fit in properly, and they just keep repeating a lot of this stuff, but they don't need to have any talent, honestly. If they had any smarts, they would look at these stories and just adapt them. Say you adapted it. It's inspired by such and such. It's okay to do that. We are artists and we get inspired. It's fine to do that.
To do that, and here's the thing, bro. It was the perfect scenario to introduce a Magnificent Seven moment. You got Dengar, you got Forlom, you have like IG 88. You could have got these, like, for him,
Zuckuss.
especially if Zuckuss, if for him to basically say, look, you know, if I know who to call, I know who to reach out to.
Dude,
I have the credit to do
how
it.
awesome would that have been?
Would that
to
have
see
fucking been,
the bounty
bro?
hunters that are on the deck of the Executor?
Bro, the same bounty hunters that were on the deck, bro, and especially when the spike, bro, to see that scene with all of them just walking through the town, slow as fuck, ready to fuck shit up, that would have been a moment that fans would have been talking about to the end of time, because we always wanted to see those bounty hunters get busy. Now, we always hear this shit, bro, and it always goes through Hollywood. It goes through all IPs where they talk about rewrites. Oh, the script wasn't good. So it's the execs that did not like the fucking writing that decided to change that shit, bro.
Well, and
those moments are stolen from us because people in the fucking fear, bro. I'm so tired of it, man.
Also,
literally,
who decided to write a scene where Boba Fett is literally chasing a small droid around a kitchen? And then Boba Fett grabs the "I am Boba Fett" to a droid. Like when I look at a scene like that, see, this is the thing that frustrates me. When you watch a scene like that, you look to yourself and you think, okay, not only did somebody write this, somebody read it, somebody approved it, somebody scheduled it, and then they spent the day shooting it. And with all of those people, and you're talking about a fearsome bounty hunter that knew Han Solo's tactics in Empire Strikes Back, knew that he was going to Besman, figured it out, got an Imperial garrison there and Vader there way before the Millennium Falcon arrived. This is a smart dude.
Man.
And who decided to take a character? You would never make... You know what they should ask themselves? You know, if Clint Eastwood was going to do something goofy, he made a goofy movie like Every Which Way But Loose. You know, you don't see the outlaw Josie Wales doing that. You don't see the Man with No Name doing that. You don't see William Money from Unforgiven doing that. You know, you can't. So you're going from slapstick. What's the tone of this show? Like, what are you going for? And if you said, you know what we're going for? We're going for Throne of Blood meets The Godfather. And then people are like, fuck yeah, dude, that's what we're doing. So everything's informed by that.
They couldn't do Lone Wolf and Cub again for season 3. That was the problem.
That too.
And they couldn't come up with a creative idea for how that was going to work. And certainly it was more thrown together. But that's all they've been working off of all that time. There were a lot of filler episodes in seasons 1 and 2. Yeah. So, you know, once they exhausted the Lone Wolf and Cub, I mean, Luke is now the main character. He's 100% stronger than all the Mandalorians combined. So you know, you can't best him. So now once you take him away, once you take Grogu out of that, Grogu has not grown. He's not any different. You know, it should have been a 20-year gap. It's okay if he doesn't see Mando for 20 years. Mando will still be around after. Yeah. He's going to be here. But it should have been a 20-year gap. And go ahead and let them do FaceTime.
Yeah, and you're basically robbing the cat. Like, again, like you're robbing the story, a story that could be told. You're robbing a story because of stupid ass decisions that you've made. Like, literally, I totally agree. We could basically see in hiatus away from Grogu. The thing is, the only way to miss something is to, you know, distance make the heart grow fonder. They always say that. Yeah. And people who love Grogu can wait to see
an animated series like this is my opinion. Give Grogu a nice animated children's series. So those of us who want to see him do his little things and learn waves of the Force, which it will take him a long time to do, we can enjoy that.
And then, through that,
and let's go ahead and enjoy. That's what animated series can do. They can give you that foundation about Grogu because there's a lot of mystery behind him. We don't know anything about him. You know, it's kind of like what the Clone Wars did for you know, the episodes 1, 2, and 3. We need something like that for Grogu because we're not getting enough information about him. Certainly, he's much more dynamic. He was hiding his personality. We can see his personality grow in an animated series, 2 to 3 years of an animated series with Luke. Oh my gosh, come on.
Yeah, like definitely, like they did with Clone Wars, like you said. Yeah, let's see that. That would make so much more sense, and then catch up with him later. Hell, I would even want to actually see stories with him and Keller and Beck, basically their travels. Stuff like that would have been incredible. I don't want to see a training montage of him basically playing paintball on a beach. I don't want to see that shit because it made absolutely no sense.
So
if I was basically that Mandalorian kid, I would have kicked him like a field goal over the waters, bro, and that would have been easy. It would have been a done deal. This is the way. Punt and said forward. That's it, and that would have like straight up. Like, that's easy.
No,
that's an easy win.
Here's the thing for me. The thing that makes me so angry is, why did that scene ever make it past the conceptual phase?
Exactly.
They actually went out and shot that, and because what that does is it diminishes Grogu. It diminishes the Mandalorians hanging out on that beach was the dumbest shit ever in the first place. You know, and the
land of the lost planet.
It was just the creatures. I'm like, what? Like the whole conception of the Mandalorians, I get the code and all that, but even the whole taking off the helmet, this is the way, and all this crap. The reason I started to really despise all of that is like, there is a reality to what it means to be a humanoid, to live and like, and what they're doing is they make these things up where they're not functional in the quote unquote real world. Like, you know, okay, I get it. You have to leave your helmet on. Why would anybody do that? Because part of the Mandalorian's job is going to end up being, you're going to have to negotiate with people. You're going to have to go to affairs of state. Like, you're not going to want, sometimes you're not going to want people to know you're fucking Mandalorian. You're going to want to be like undercover because you're going to be reconnoitering a situation.
Tom is asking about if we're going to get to the super chats tonight.
Yeah, we have been. Thomas Logan's up next. Actually, 200 Watt Studio says the best nuclear bomb special effect was in Lumet's Failsafe. Failsafe's a pretty hardcore movie. You know, at the end, the United States president, we accidentally bomb Moscow, and he has to let them bomb New York so he stave off World War III. Thomas Logan said, Hunter Biden's ties to Burisma are the issue, not his drug use. That's the company. Joe Biden's ties to Burisma should have made him ineligible to run for president. You know, I mean, I think that's kind of an oversimplification of things because we now live in a world where the people that are running for president, they're coming from families that are wealthy, that have holdings that go back. People are doing all kinds of business now. So how do you find somebody that's even going to be electable to the president of the United States that doesn't have ties to big business? I mean, when you have things like Vanguard and BlackRock that basically run the planet, you've got people that are commanding. I mean, this is another thing. I think that a lot of people have lost sight of the reality of life, how things are really working. But I mean, you know, he might have been ineligible to run for president, but I wish I could hear somebody make that argument and not have it sound like just partisan bullshit politics. But I mean, that's something that should have been brought up in the campaign, that should have been brought up when he was vice president, that should have been brought up 50 years ago perhaps. But now to talk about it today and use it, it's a wedge issue. If he's president of the United States, we need our president to be able to function. And I feel like our elected officials are now, there's so much partisanship going on within the United States that our politicians have to deal with so much bullshit at home that we have ceded half the world to the Chinese. It's wacky. But anyway, you know, I don't know enough about it really. But Hunter Becknell says, I think Nolan does a good job of showing how physics work in both Oppenheimer and Interstellar. I'm a visual learner, so it worked for me. I totally agree with you. And the fact that Nolan would even take the time to make us understand physics, because physics are amazing. You know, and he did a lot of it, which I think is great. I totally agree.
Quantum physics is back.
Quantum, it's never left us. Michael Preston says, hi, Rob. I believe that war in modern times is obsolete because we're now a world economy and we gain more from cooperation than any conquered territories. I totally agree with you. The problem is all of our leaders, like Putin, still wants to bring the rise of the motherland, bring the Soviet Union back to its former glory. I get it, but it's like, hey, you want to do that? How about not take as much money from your people and turn Russia into a thriving economic capitalist / socialist power, and bring your people in the 21st century rather than be a kleptocracy and take everything from them. I mean, Darth Plato says we need to watch Mincemeat. It has real Bond vibes. I want to see that because I know a little bit about that, so I want to.
We did a watch party on my channel of Operation Mincemeat. Robert, you will love it. According to Darth Plato, they actually do say, I think, in the film verisimilitude.
Oh yeah, so, it's I know all about it. I just haven't gotten around to watching it. Our friend the Richard says Pee Wee Herman, Paul Rubens, he became an idol on par with Henson to me. The animatronic and other big words I can't afford to spell here. I'll miss him. Love. Aloha. Yeah, I mean, Paul Rubens understood whimsy better than most, and I will miss him as well. I like Pee Wee Herman a lot. Yeah. Hey, Lael and Orem, what are your Secret Invasion thoughts?
I watched 2 episodes, and that was all I watched because
it was trash. It was trash. It was trash.
I had such high hopes for it, having read those scripts. I thought it was going to be so much better.
Rob, I was.
They killed off Martin Freeman in the first 2. It was either the first or the second episode, and I was disappointed in that. But I watched the entire series. So.
I knew we were in trouble there was dialogue from the second page of the script that I loved, and that was gone. That dialogue was gone. I'm like, uh-oh.
Yo. That last episode, the season finale, was by far the biggest. You made everything that we knew about Nick Fury before that episode, you might as well just throw it out the door, because they made him an idiot in this last episode.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
Literally, they did. They made him look like a blatant idiot in this last episode. And there was no way to explain it. There's no way to basically make good on what was done with that character. There was no way to, now here's the thing. Translation from Secret Invasions of what we got from the comics, we knew we weren't going to get that in live action because, again, it's hard to adapt that story to live action with all the character involvement, everyone who was involved and everyone who we haven't seen yet in the cinematic universe. So we knew that was an impossible task. They were going somewhere with this season. From episode 1 going forward, I was like, okay, I'm on board. I'm excited to see where it goes. The dialogue was good, this, that, and the third. But it fell short. From the moment the president went to the hospital, that's when it went completely downhill. Because literally, when you have an official that high up and you have lackluster security in a hospital, I was like, oh, come on, what? Makes no sense. It made absolutely no sense. They made you hate Rhodey, but there was no payoff. You know what I mean? Even when we found Rhodey at the final episode, literally, and you're telling us, Rob, they're telling us now they're telling us that Rhodey himself was missing ever since Civil War.
You know what? When that director said that, I'm like, I threw my hands up, and I'm like, way to diminish your universe, buddy. Like, bro, when he fell out of the sky and was wounded. And by the way, one of my favorite lines in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we're all about that superhero life. Come on, you telling me a Skrull came up with that bullshit? No way.
Like, literally, bro. Like,
that was Rhodey.
Literally, bro. And here's the thing, bro. There's a scene, even the scene in Endgame, when he's crawling out of the suit. When he's crawling out of the suit and he can't walk, there is blood on his forehead, and it's red blood. How do you explain that Rhodey was taken during Civil War. How do you explain that he missed the simple fact that his best friend died? How do you explain the events of the blip and him not know any of that fucking... Fuck y'all, man. That's just the way I felt about it, bro.
I mean,
like,
it's funny
fuck
that
y'all, man. Like, they just took something and ruined it. That last episode and that final fucking... Gravik was a character that should have lasted. He should have been a Super Skrull.
Yes.
He would have been a threat going forward.
He should have been the Super Skrull.
Going forward, he should have been the Super Skrull going forward in the cinematic universe, because he was a problem. He was a problem and definitely could have been a sustainable character and a sustainable villain that would have went far. They took a shit on the character the last episode. They took a shit on that character the last episode.
And it wasn't even like an Amber Heard on your side of the bed shit either.
No.
It was a bad shit.
There was a bad shit. They took a shit and they completely destroyed the character last episode. That last episode put the worst taste in my mouth that going forward in the MCU, I can't trust what's going to happen. That's the way I feel.
Well, you know what's funny? I think, honestly, I think that I'm perplexed by this. I have no interest at all. I love the Infinity Saga. I loved it. I could watch, for me, Infinity War and Endgame are like Godfather 1 and 2. If they're on, I'll just put them on and watch 15 minutes because I love them. I know those movies so well. I love those movies so much. And that's those Avengers movies are the culmination. When I was talking to, God, who was it? It was, somebody was giving a really, it was Mahler was explaining about how those movies work. Like, you had what happened in Captain America, the Winter Soldier, which led directly to things that happened. They would inform the next movie. And there was a tapestry being interwoven and built throughout the first three phases of the MCU. And all of that has gone away. And I was really thinking about how really so much of it's inconsequential and none of it's led to anything else. And I think about all the ramifications of, like, Eternals. It's such a big, from a philosophical standpoint, it's such a, and yet, but it happened unto itself. The Eternals,
there's been no mention since that film. There's been no mention in any other whether it's
it's like none of the
She-Hulk, which that don't count. I'm sorry, that doesn't count.
Yeah, none of the people even know the Eternals exist.
No, they don't.
And it's like, okay, if that's the case, why even introduce them?
Exactly.
Why?
What sense does that make? What sense does it basically make where you introduce these particular characters who have an influence on the MCU in general? They have a heavy there's a balance there, and you miss the opportunity to introduce them in the proper way. Literally, you could have actually done it. And here's the thing. It's crazy because even in the Eternals, they know everything there is to know about the Avengers, but the Avengers don't know who the fuck they are.
Right. And not only that,
at all.
We don't even know who. Is there an Avengers team?
Exactly. They don't know who the fuck these people are.
They're in the middle of Phase 5, and we don't know.
Yeah,
like
and we don't know.
Guardians. You'd think that at the end of I really like Guardians 3 a lot. I mean, I like that. But at the end of Guardians 3, Peter Quill goes back to Earth. He's fought in the Infinity War, and he goes
and
back home.
And lived ahead of a Celestial.
Yeah, and they bought it. They turned it into a business.
Yeah,
and it's like you'd think the first thing Quill would do, they would have I mean, I'm sure he didn't think about doing this, but he'd be like, "Huh, there's a Celestial in the ocean, huh?"
Bro, and listen to
let the Celestial emerge.
But here's the thing. This is fuck. This is where the problem gets, bro. And when I think about this shit, it makes me so fucking mad about Secret Invasions, right? So, Nick Fury has been on Sword the entire time in outer space, right? And he's been watching. He's been monitoring the Earth to see if there's any fucking threats, right? People look at me. Where the fuck was he when Erson the Judge? Where the fuck was he? You mean to tell me he didn't see that big ass Celestial What the fuck was your bro? That shit. Oh my god, that shit makes me so fucking mad when I think about that shit, bro. Like literally, he was there, and they've been monitoring threats. And you mean to tell me that nobody else saw fucking Harrison the judge out in space? Nobody saw him. Not even the Guardians. Nobody knew that it was a fuck. Get the fuck out of here, man. I'm that right there. That process right there. That way of thinking. What the fuck are you thinking when that is never addressed? And he said nothing about it. All you're worried about is a secret invasion? That was a fucking threat. Omega level fucking threat. And you should be able to see a big ass celestial on Earth.
And
like literally right now.
Wouldn't the Skrulls go,
yeah, bro. Like,
the
what
judge?
the fuck was that?
You had the judge. The judge is going to judge this planet.
Bro.
There's already a celestial coming out of it. I think that anybody that knew anything about the celestials would get as far away from Earth as possible.
I think the Celestial is still alive.
Well,
yo, come on, man. Like, and somebody said it out there, not the same universe. I hope that's what they're thinking. If it's basically a multiversal situation, I hope, because it right now. But see, the thing is, you can't say that because they're addressing things that are in the same universe.
Right.
They are. So bro, they fucked up. They literally fucked up, and there's no coming back from that. Like literally, how do you go forward? And I'm being damn near serious. How do you go forward now after you've already introduced these aspects? There's too many holes in there, and nobody is fixing these things. So how is there going to be a reset? Because you fucked up. Like it literally come out. I would much rather them come out to the public and say, you know what, everybody, we fucked up, but we're going to fix it. Say that, and I'll be like, all right, cool.
I wonder if they can. You know, I mean, even it's going to be really interesting. We got Loki coming down the pike now. You know, that's the next thing that we're going to see is Loki. And I'm like, I don't care about the time variance authority and all that wackiness and whatever's going on there and the sacred timeline. It's so far removed from why I liked Winter Soldier and why I like Civil War and Avengers and all that. I just the time variance authority and all this stuff. They've done all of these things that they're in the comics, but I'm like, you know. The funny thing is, this is such a weird thing for me to say, but the most exciting thing that's happened to me in the MCU is reading the Hellfire Gala 2023 when Orcus attacked the X-Men. That was some Omega level. I was like, I haven't read a comic book that made me go. I haven't read Fall of X yet, but just some guy's channel,
bro. If you read Fall of X right now,
you just did a review.
Bro, Fall of X right now is one of the best written comics that I've seen because they are fucking shit up.
Dude, just some guy reviewed it, and I love Just Some Guy. And he goes, I'm gonna go read this comic again. And he said, I can't believe that I'm saying this about a Marvel comic. Yep. And I'm like,
it is the single best right now. It is the single best run because right now there are no prisoners. And on top of that, Kitty Pryde, we are seeing Shadowcat back again.
Oh, I know. Well, she went back to the mansion and got those swords, man.
Bro, she is unleashed. Now we're seeing Xavier at his worst.
Well, I mean,
you know what I mean?
He's a broken man.
He is a broken man, bro. Like literally the way. And on top of that, we're seeing that Tony Stark Tech is responsible for warmongers, for damn Sentinels now. Sentinels are carrying Stark Tech at this moment, dude. And are fucking shit up.
That Hellfire Gala 23 comic.
Yeah,
I was like, because it was. I gotta tell you, so I read House of X and Powers of 10. And I really, that's all I read. I really loved it. And a lot of people hate this Hickman X-Men. I love the whole thing. Then I've been going out and getting the hardcovers lately. So I got the X-Men hardcover that Hickman wrote. Then I went out and got the first Hellfire Gala thing. And I haven't caught up with them, but I did want to get so I just on a whim bought the Hellfire Gala because I wanted to get the new edition of the new X-Men omnibus. Yeah. And I went to the comic store and I bought I didn't even realize there's the Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths. So I'm like, okay, I'll buy that too because I didn't have that. But I bought that. And then, I bought Hellfire. I'm like, I'm going to buy a $9 comic just because I want to see. Dude, my jaw was on the floor when I got to the end of that comic.
Yeah.
I was like,
what the fuck? Yep.
I'm like, wow.
Yep.
I was going to work my way through the Hickman verse of X-Men. And I was just like, I couldn't. It was the greatest thing ever. And I'm like, oh my God.
The greatest thing ever. And they're basically right now, for anybody who knows who Exodus is. Exodus, again, Omega level mutant. Literally the power of will for him. The more faith that people have in him, the more powerful he gets. And they are setting him up to be another mutant messiah. They are setting him up to be God. And I cannot effing wait. This thing is going off because right now, and a lot of people, like you said, they didn't like Hickman's run on House of X, Powers of X, and stuff like that.
You know what? It was way too weird for people. I get it.
Yeah,
but I've been reading X-Men for 40 years, more than 40 years, and it's like enough. I've read every story there's ever been. There's never. But Hickman comes in and he takes stuff like the whole Krakoa era and the resurrections and Moira and all that. I'm like, this is awesome. I mean, it was so weird. Some of it wasn't good, but it was so weird that a lot of it. I love the whole thing about Moira's different lives and all that. It was so interesting. And Hickman's
now she's working with Orcus right now. So they've made. The only thing is, it's like that's the part of me that's like, damn, why more though? Why are they taking more? But I understand that
Moira's she'll be redeemed somehow. I think she'll, but her different. And then also Firestar.
She's basically
Spider-Man and his amazing friends, and now Firestar's like the double agent in the. I mean, it's so. And Kitty's like, I'm gonna kill Firestar, but you don't know, Kitty. You don't know.
She has zero idea what's basically going on around. And now basically Children of the Vault. So if you're reading now, the Children of the Vault have actually gotten out. Now, mind you, the Children of the Vault are probably the most powerful threat because they completely demolished the X-Men. They completely demolished the Avengers. But now what they're doing right now is sharing their technology. They're sharing everything with the human race, and they're posing as heroes, fighting for them. I don't know what the fuck is about to happen, but shit right now is going off, bro.
I just hope this is all planned.
Yeah,
because it seems like it's well planned, and
it is.
Now, with Fall of X, is it a new creative team that's come in, and this is the transition out of the Krakoan era?
This is what it feels like. It definitely feels like they are basically because it's a new team.
People who are watching the stream right now are going, "What the fuck are they talking about?"
Get the books, and you'll understand. It is.
Yeah, it's a fall, but
it is phenomenal. It is such a phenomenal. Here's the thing. I'll tell you this much. For everybody out there who's an MCU fan, right? If you're a comic book fan, or if you're sick of what you're basically seeing in the MCU at this time, right? If you're sick of it, because keep in mind, there is a writer's strike, there's an actor strike right now, so you're not going to see a couple of things for a long time.
Yeah.
You might as well just go back and read some comics and just get your feel of the things that you may wanted to see. Because I'm telling you right now, the writing in these books right now is phenomenal. It is phenomenal. And just get your fix there. And just say fuck the MCU right now.
I just love that. I remember when Nimrod was new.
Yeah.
I remember when Nimrod was new. And it was always drawn kind of weird, but I love the idea of Nimrod.
Yeah.
40 years later, 35 years later, to see somebody just like my new favorite thing is no one can know I'm here, so I'm gonna drop in from orbit so no one sees me coming. I was just like, I literally was like, yes. When that happened, I just, man, that was a way to fuck shit up, and it was so good,
bro. Nimrod came, like everything was going good, and they had established a new team, and everybody was polished, everybody was clean.
I know, here's the new X-Men.
Yeah, and everything was announced and all that, and Nimrod was like, I'm fucking y'all up. He crashed in the glass and went ham. Even fucked the Juggernaut up. He saved him for last. Like literally, bro. I have never seen a mollywop like that in a long time. Like straight up, bro. Like they went through and fucked. It was. I'm reading this book and I'm like, wait a minute. Am I really reading this? And I'm like you, I had to go back and read it again. I had to make sure that what I read was there because it was so good. And I was happy to finally see it. Because the thing is, Hickman's run made the X-Men kind of arrogant. Now, mind you, they had a right to be because of how they were treated, by the human race.
They basically took over the world and said, I love that.
They took over the world. Krakoa was their own now. Their sovereign land. They've taken over that, and again, they were issuing out medication for the human race, but there were stipulations behind it. So again, now we're seeing that whole thing overran. This shit is crazy.
Dude,
I'm so happy to see Kitty Pryde back doing what she does best.
I loved that they, here, we're going to deliver these vaccines for you. Yeah. And it turns out you think, okay, it was so evil what they did. I loved it so much. Mm-hmm. I hope Orcs just starts killing, like just wiping out thousands of people just because they can to just to give that foment that hatred even more. But it was so good. Listen, I know we're at the end of our show, but let's go through this. I'm glad you feel the same way. Yeah. RRTNZ says Chuck Norris never has to buy gas. His vehicles run on pure fear. Hail Bob and ever seen The Toast of London? Fucking hilarious. Cheers. I have not seen The Toast of London.
I haven't seen it either.
Mikey Lito says Looking for Mr. Goodbar is another film from that era. Yes, it is a great film from that era. I think that's Alan Pakula. Is it Alan Pakula? Maybe it isn't Alan Pakula. I'm thinking of Clute. But and Clute's like that too. But Looking for Mr. Goodbar, a little rough trade sex. It's not as, it's more cis, but it's good. Looking for Mr. Goodbar is good. Darth Plato asks about my 7-Eleven research. I tabled that project, so I haven't been doing my 7-Eleven show, but maybe one day. Tom Jr. Jackson says, Rob, fisting in water sports? All we're missing is squirting for the trifecta. What a feeling. You are looking amazing tonight.
Oh, thank you, Tom. Thank you so much. And thank you, Tom. We are all goof people. Thank you so much for everything you do.
And you are billowing. Zachary Zabali says, was getting visions of Pazuzu face from The Exorcist last night. I think I delight too much in people's shock watching Exorcist for the first time. Hey, don't apologize, Zachary. One of my favorite things to do is watch people's reaction videos to watching The Exorcist for the first time, especially teenage girls, because they don't know what they're about to get hit by. And it's crazy to watch. It's crazy to watch. I already said Joe Panora said KRS-One is my favorite BDP.
Yeah.
Scott Bartholomew said TOS was a natural evolution of the Twilight Zone. Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I mean, those morality stories, things like that.
I was querying Toast of London. I apologize. I didn't know it was going to make a little chime. I apologize.
Oh, no, it's okay. 200 Watt Studio says, why couldn't the musical songs be about the crew trying to figure out how to get out of the anomaly? Like they sing to each other instead of talking. It should have been, instead of a musical, it should have been an operetta. Like the Umbrellas of Cherbourg or something, where everybody sings what they're doing all day long. Because here's the thing. I understand the musical form, but they tried to have an in-universe reason why they were singing. But then they had backing tracks. Like, how did they all know what the tune was of the song that they were going to sing? It's one thing to have to sing. It's a whole nother thing to carry a tune.
And it's a whole other thing to have a whole chorus of people singing the same things.
Yeah, and how do they all know what they're going to sing? It's not like they're looking at sheet music. So I know it seems weird to say this, but they were the ones that set up the musical within the confines of the reality of their show. With Uhura sending in the American Songbook, which, by the way, they didn't even get. You got, apparently the American Songbook was completely understood by the Improbable Anomaly and fed back out as random songs, and it turned into a boy band Klingon thing. What the hell was that? So this is another problem with Star Trek. It was them who said Uhura beamed the American songbook into the anomaly. Well, I'm waiting to find out. Well, I wonder who they're going to. Which songs are we going to get back from the American songbook?
A hell of a tease. A hell of.
I mean, they said it. They said it in the episode. So you're like, and then you know what that shows me? Those motherfuckers don't know what the American songbook is,
they don't know.
and nor do they know what's in it. And it's like, you guys said it. And this is why I can't stand so much modern genre fiction. And this is why Star Trek's terrible, because the people that are writing it do not understand what they're writing. The fact the way they've treated the Gorn is abhorrent. They've just decided we need an adversary. Let's the Gorn's pretty good. The Gorn's always goofy. I look at that and it's just so silly. Now he does commercials with Shatner. What if we took the Gorn and made them really, I don't know, formidable, and made them just like the aliens, xenomorphs? They'll be fine.
Well,
and they did, and it's not fine.
They do look like alien. Like there's some tail raisings that I'm like, that's total alien. Come on.
I love the fact that one of them was wearing a pressure suit over their head, but their tail was out to the vacuum of space.
Yeah, who knew? But the really odd thing, and we were talking about music and the state of music, and how growing up there were always specific albums that would be made. There might be a Christmas album, there might be a 4th of July thing, whatever holiday this thing might have been around, and it's regardless of what the person's religion or ethnicity is, they could make a Christmas album. So it didn't matter, and you always heard certain songs over and over again. The same for these singers and standards. It'd be concerts that you would go to. 4th of July concert might have very specific songs. Labor Day, Memorial Day might have very specific songs you would expect to hear. Going to a ballpark, even, you're expecting to hear like the national anthem. It's an expectation. But I don't even know if artists are making these albums anymore where they would have just singers and singers. So-and-so sings the blues, or so-and-so does jazz, or this person does R&B, and this person a trip to Venice or trip to Aruba, or they're doing a calypso or some kind of Spanish album, something where they would have very specific genre style album. I don't even know if artists are doing this anymore. Some artists would have 100 albums because they've covered so many different areas. Yeah. So it's quite a surprise. I would have imagined that whoever would have gone ahead and said, let's see if we could find stuff that might be appropriate for Star Trek. Let's just go ahead. There's probably some stuff in there that's very people like, oh yeah, that's so clever. You could just hear another, that's so cool that they sang that. That's so appropriate. But we didn't get a chance to enjoy that because they didn't follow through on it.
I mean, to be clear, the Great American Songbook, according to Wikipedia, because I want to see what they said was all encompassed, the Great American Songbook is the loosely defined canon of significant 20th century American jazz standards. Why is everything 20th century? Like the first thing, Lael, in the first scene of the season finale of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, you're looking at like what looks like Main Street, USA. And you hear the captain's log, and she says, yes, this is a colony like outside, I'm paraphrasing now, outside of Federation space, and they've decided on the small town model, patterned after a Midwestern town from the 20th century. Why would a space colony ever decide to do that? Why, if you were going to set up a colony somewhere, would you be like, yes, they've decided on the 17th century American model. We're going to go back, which of course they have no running water or power. They're going to use outhouses and all that. I mean, that shit's, I understand they're trying to make, again, a joke about Star Trek shooting on standing sets. I hated it so much. I hate modern Star Trek. Scott Bartholomew says, mark my words, Chapel will bear Spock's child in season 3. Yeah. I mean, yeah, because it's going to be, they'll replay the Carol Marcus thing. But I know.
It's like a soap opera.
It's all it is, I'm sure. And then, of course, he'll be evil or something.
No, they don't even love each other. Honestly, they're not in love. Like this is space, and they need someone, and I sympathize with that. But they're not in love with one another. Like they're not.
Yeah, but Spock already had that. He had T'Pring, man. I mean, T'Pring Nurse Chapel. T'Pring Nurse Chapel. Come on now. I'm telling you, T'Pring would be a much better bounce than Chapel. I'm just saying. Son of John says, that's the patriarchy talking. Son of John says, I would say that the writing is really the mechanization of Alex and Akiva perverting what the episode writers know about Star Trek, like Roddenberry overwriting Harlan Ellison sitting on the edge of forever. Well, the difference, though, is Harlan Ellison wrote like Scotty being a drug dealer. And he wrote, Harlan's a great writer, one of the great fantasists of the 20th century, but he wrote things that didn't work within the context of the show. So Roddenberry, as the showrunner, did what all good showrunners do and brought it more in line with the show itself. The writers for Discovery took Harlan Ellison and made his Guardian of the Guardian, the Time Guardian, the Guardian of Forever, turned him into an ambulatory Paul Guilfoyle, which made it more. I mean, they literally contradicted Gene Roddenberry and went back to Harlan Ellison's original script in Discovery. I mean, are you fucking kidding me? They did that. I think they think they're cool. That's why they did that. Sean Hoover says, Strange New Worlds kills brain cells. Would love to see the live action remakes of the animated series. Do you know what? Remaking the animated series and turning them into Strange New Worlds would have been better. Watch Yesteryear to understand everything you need to know about Spock. Brilliant. Right, because Dorothy Fontana wrote it just like she wrote Journey to Babel. Dan Candy says, Rob, if you ever fell in love with a Skrull who decided one day to permanently assume the form of Cyrano Jones, could you still F her? No, I couldn't. Cyrano Jones, I'm straight, so it'd be hard. Be hard. The Richard says, Kai Patterson brokered a deal with Lucasfilm and teamed up and created the amazing Obi-Wan film. He and a former competitor now have remixed the Boba Fett show. Yeah, but that's still they're reworking stuff, and they're cool. I think the reworking of the Obi-Wan show is cool, but you still have to deal with the fact that that's not what they really made. They didn't make that.
And they're not putting it out.
Yeah, they're not putting it out. Not like the Spice Diver cut of Dune, which did come out with the German version. By the way, my the bells and whistles Dune set is being reissued, not in the big box, but it's being reissued. Glenn Mark says, late to the party, so I'm guessing Subspace Rhapsody was not the bridge action you were all looking for. No, it was not. But people get a lot of action on that show. I'm telling you. 200 Watt Studio says, failsafe is effective because you don't need to see the explosion. It's true. Your imagination is the best special effect. It's intense with two guys on a phone. If you guys haven't seen Failsafe, watch it. It's great. It's really, 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 really good. Guy Newby says, Disney are so clueless they haven't even given us the theatrical original trilogy cuts on physical media. They must take money. They could use some right now. I think that's a legal issue that Lucas... this is a theory that I heard floated that I believe in. Lucas made the special editions because he has new copyrights on those movies and he doesn't have to give his ex-wife money, and Marcia owned half. So I think I've or something along those lines. It was a very acrimonious divorce, and I don't know if that's true. Thomas Logan, to take us home tonight, says, Volume 5. Shaddam IV, Christopher Walken will grant you asylum in his empire if you complete a task. Either kill Paul Atreides or remake Star Trek 09 frame by frame. Oh, I'd kill Paul. Paul dies. He's going to die anyway, and I'll save the galaxy. I'll save billions of people. So it's a good trade-off. I'll learn the weirding way and go after him, and I'll take him out. Kids, that brings us to the end of Super Chats and Tips. So thank you for that. What do you guys got going? You got to go, Lael, because you're leaving for Brooklyn.
Yes.
But you know what? Yes. But you know what? If you really want to be cool about it, no sleep.
Till Brooklyn. You already know, bro. No sleep till Brooklyn, bro. But yeah, I'm. I wanted to. It would have been cool to basically head out because again, shout out to Louis Labitz. He was at the Yankee Stadium watching the 50th anniversary concert tonight, and I know it went off. I wish I'd have definitely been there, man, but we, definitely couldn't make it out today. But yeah, man, I'm looking forward to tomorrow, man. I am. I'm definitely looking forward to tomorrow.
And what you got anything coming up this weekend, or are you gonna be in Brooklyn the whole time?
I'm gonna be in Brooklyn the entire because I won't be back until like I think Sunday evening. So
Make
there won't
some,
be.
take some video, man. Make some updates on Instagram or put some on
Yeah,
your
I am.
page.
I am. That's basically the plan. So we're not going to have Collectors Lounge International on Sunday, but we will have Comic Book Talk with Friends on Monday. Say What Wednesday, Uncivilized Scoundrels, and again Figure Flex Friday. Then back here next Friday evening as well. So yeah, that's it. Nothing really special going on right now. I'm actually releasing a video for. I'm actually doing a Take Your Position on the Bad Batch with Phoenix Shan, so I'm working on that right now as well. But yeah, on my way to 4,000 subscribers. So definitely, if you haven't subscribed to the 1/6 Scale Man YouTube channel, please help me get to that 4,000 mark. I would appreciate it.
Help you, Obi-Wan.
Yes.
And what do you got going on? Well, wait. First of all, should I let you go now so you can go and because you got to sleep?
Who, me?
Yeah.
Oh, I can wait until you know.
Oh, okay. No, I just want to make sure. So, what do you got going on?
Tomorrow, I don't have anything planned, which is very rare. But Sunday, I have my Sunday brunch show on Positive Fandom, my YouTube channel, at 10:30 a.m. in the morning. On Monday, ladies of the PGS at 6 p.m. right here on the Burnettwork. I also have my historical watch party series that I do with Darth Plato. Last week we did Operation Mincemeat. This week we're going to be doing Greyhound, and we're continuing those historical movies that we're watching. We did Fat Man, Little Boy, and we're going to continue on. We have Napoleon coming up, which Darth Plato and I are also going to review as well. Friday, I'm supposed to be finally reviewing the final 2 episodes of Outlander. We're going to be looking at it live. Lorena Creel and I are going to be doing that. And that's pretty much everything I have planned. It's going to be a very light 2 weeks because I'm trying to enjoy what's left of the summer. And I also want to thank everybody in the chat and both of you on the panel as well. And thank you, everybody, for supporting Positive Fandom.
I just want to leave Lael with this before he leaves. Just remember, there it is, the greatness. Obviously, you've got 50 years of... I mean, look at this. You have 4 different options to buy if you want to get Cool as Ice from Germany. So there y'all go. You don't want to miss those German releases of physical media. It's no Purple Rain, but hey.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
All right, everyone. I will let my 2 compatriots go, and I will see you both next week.
All right.
And enjoy Brooklyn.
Yes. Can't wait. See you guys later. Peace out.
All right. They are peacing out. So that was a great show. Boy, what a rollicking good time this tonight's show was, wasn't it? Wasn't it, kids? I hope you enjoyed it. That's why I like Midnight Musings. I never know where this show's going to go. I guess that's why we call it Musings. I mean, it started out erudite, and then we kind of went all the way and talked about the X-Men. Hey, that's what Musings are all about. Yes. But on that note, I do want to thank everybody for generously supporting this channel via Super Chats and tips and memberships. And for you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity, we are having a member call tomorrow. It starts at 11 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time right here. And for those of you who don't know, we have these rollicking member chats. I get to see all your beautiful faces. We get to hang out and talk about, more slamming on Star Trek. Maybe, people are like, you should not watch it and maybe you'll get over it. I won't get over it. To me, it's a storytelling injustice that's been going on since 2009. And, I want somebody to look at House of the Dragon, or I want somebody to look at, not all The Expanse, but The Expanse. And I want somebody to watch a movie like Arrival, and think to themselves, why can't we bring that back to Star Trek? Why does it have to be so infantilized? Why do we have to have monsters? I hope the fucking Gorn win. I want to see Starfleet Academy Gorn. I want Gorn. The Gorn should just wipe the Federation out. The timeline's different anyway. They admitted it. Just have the Gorn win. I suggest a new strategy, R2. Let the Gorn win. I mean, my God. So please explain to me why a spacefaring race, I guess they had all of their Gornlings burst forth from the colonists, and they just let their young run around. Like, how do they find their young? It's the show's so stupid. It's so badly written. Sorry. On that note, first of all, if you guys pick up the Hellfire Gala 2023, it's worth it. And I don't buy individual flipper comics, so I'm gonna have to wait to read the omnibuses. I just rearranged my X-Men omnibuses and put them in order. Actually, kind of see that you're gonna see this is changing. The desk is no more. Is this? This is gonna be flat again. It's gonna be interesting. I got a second camera there. It's gonna be fun. I'm gonna finally do it all. Turn it all on. I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm rambling. But so tomorrow, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear, and all you have to do is listen. I want to give a special thanks and a shout out to Tom Jr. Jackson, the greatest moderator anybody ever had. I don't know who else is here. I know that Richard was here. How are you, the Richard? I hope you're doing well. Can't wait to see what you've got to show us. And again, what can I say? Thanks for everything. I will see you all in the member call later today if you want to be there. If not, you don't have to be. And on that note, have a better night. I mean, it's late, but it's always fun to muse with you. Thanks for being here.